We will now start session 3, Inclusive Business Financing. The session will be introduced and moderated by Ms. Susan Olsen, Unit Head, Private Sector Financial Institutions, South Asia, Private Sector Operations Division, Asian Development Bank. I would now like to invite Ms. Olsen to open the discussion.
Thanks, Irene, and good afternoon, everyone. I am joining you from New Delhi, India, and I'm looking forward to having the discussion this afternoon with our panelists who are really representing a wide range of perspectives and geographies from across Asia. We're going to talk about inclusive business financing, of course, obviously, which is a topic that is near and dear to the mandate of the Asian Development Bank as a multilateral development bank focused on financial inclusion and financing inclusive business models ourselves. But we're going to try and cover in this particular session is a bit of a pragmatic approach to how we can contribute somehow as investors and financiers or enablers of financing to scaling inclusive business models. We know for those who have been in the morning sessions of the Inclusive Business Summit today that you've heard already from policymakers talking about the importance of inclusive business models as an approach to rebuilding post COVID-19 or post the pandemic. If inclusive business as a topic, as a private sector model to promote social inclusion and to promote economic development and development impact was important before 2020, and clearly there's never been a better time to focus on inclusive business as a policy response in light of the current pandemic impact. I think you've heard also from the CEOs of companies who are creating themselves, who are actually driving the inclusive business models and doing the operations on the ground as well, what some of the opportunities are from their perspective as business leaders and some of the challenges associated with implementing business models. So we think that that's a good segue to our topic on financing, because obviously if there's business potential and there's a need for scaling the business models, given the scope of needs in Asian markets and social impact needs in light of COVID-19, then we need capital. We need the right kind of capital. We need enough capital. We need the right kinds of instruments to be able to support these inclusive business models. So I'm looking forward to hearing from our panelists, not only about the kinds of financing instruments that they're working with in their different organizations. I know we're going to talk a bit about debt. We're going to talk about equity, how to use instruments to de-risk investments as well. And we're also going to cover a range of specialized topics within the broader realm of inclusive business. We're going to focus a bit on how to support gender-led inclusive business models. Also talk about climate finance and fintech, which has never been a more important subset of inclusive business models, I think, than it is in 2020. So with that, let me just turn to quickly introduce each of our panelists. We have first Ms. Pat-Sien Lau, who's Chief of Staff and Policy Advisor for the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, AVPN. Pat-Sien is joining us from Singapore. We have Mr. Jonathan Wong, who's the Chief of Technology and Innovation for United Nations SCAP. Jonathan's based in Bangkok. Jennifer Buckley is Managing Director for the Small Enterprise Assistance Fund, or CF. Jennifer is also based in Singapore. We turn then to John McKinley. John is a Managing Partner for Mekong Strategic Partners. He's joining us from Phnom Penh, Cambodia. We turn to Hong Kong. Maud Severi-Mornay is a Senior Advisor now to the Global Impact Investing Network, or GIN, formerly Head of Debt for Responsibility in Asian Pacific. And we have, last but not least, I'm just speaking in order that the panelists will actually speak on the panel, is Ms. Mercy Semarangkir, who's Managing Director for the Asiasi Fintech Association in Indonesia, joining us from Jakarta. So with that, we're going to use the time we have today. We only have 45 minutes and we have a rich set of content to cover. So we'll do a first round of discussions, one question and answer session with each of the panelists. We want to leave some time at the end to encourage discussion with the audience participating on the chat. So we encourage you to write in as the session progresses and send your questions. Let us know also where you're writing from. And we'll save some time to discuss those at the end of the panel. Without further ado then, let's turn to Pat-Sien. And Pat-Sien, AVPN is a very unique umbrella organization, in my opinion, because you have a broad range of investors and donors that you represent. You have someone that sit maybe on the more philanthropic side of the spectrum, donors, NGOs. I know you have private wealth high net worth individuals who are members as well, impact funds, investors looking for more private sector return type capital on their investment, as well as impact. So given that broad range of perspectives that you represent, can you tell us a bit about what AVPN members are looking for in terms of inclusive business models? And also please comment on how or whether that's shifted at all or changed at all in light of the impact of the pandemic.
Thanks very much, Susan, for that introduction, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone that's dialing in. As Susan, as you pointed out, the kinds of organizations that are members of AVPN represent a broad range of potential impact capital that can be mobilized towards supporting inclusive business. And the nature of them representing both, I would say, impact-driven capital like philanthropy, as well as impact plus commercial return-seeking capital like impact investors, allows there to be a great opportunity for there to be a continuum of support for inclusive businesses to grow. And this is interesting because not only when we look at inclusive business, not only is there a need for the growth of small enterprises and medium enterprises that are working directly with the base of the pyramid to be part of the broader economic ecosystem, there is also support that is needed to ensure that they are ready for the engagement with the economy at a broad scale, and also ready for engagement with larger companies that can integrate them into part of their supply chain and so forth. So when we started out this journey with inclusive business, we were glad to have had the partnership with the Inclusive Business Action Network to jointly develop opportunities to bring in the social investment community to explore new ways that they can support the growth of inclusive business, both in terms of how they may be able to support the growth, provide the growth capital that can encourage the seeding and close the pioneer gap that accompanies the development of such organizations, but also to see how they could further encourage the inclusion of IB practices into business models of larger investors and larger companies. This was a really interesting journey for us, but it took on an additional urgency as the pandemic hit, because we could see quite clearly that not only was it a health crisis, it's also leading to an economic crisis in many different markets in this region, where the MSME community, small businesses are struggling to make sure that they can continue to maintain livelihood opportunities and local microeconomies, but yet were fighting for the attention of investors and funders in that space. So in respect to the way that our members were responding over the pandemic, we could see that there was a lot more opportunity for the potentially de-risking type capital like philanthropy, like grants, like other forms of innovative blended financing opportunities to actually step in and support the liquidity and operational challenges that many of these MSMEs were facing. We also saw a lot more opportunities for our social investor members to be engaging with governments in partnership to complement some of the government initiatives to stimulate the local economy, to provide social protection to the MSMEs as well in various markets. And I think the evidence of the opportunity for social investors to work more closely with the inclusive business agenda has never been more clear.
No question. And since we have a few minutes to elaborate on that, I would love it if you could give us some examples, perhaps, if possible. I mean, right now there's a lot of need, potentially a lot of opportunity. How would AVPN work to facilitate that connect? It sounds like you represent a lot of potential sources of financing, sources of capital. I know AVPN speaks about being able to cover the continuum capital, but you also mentioned de-risking, which in an era of business slowdowns, business shutdowns, lockdowns, is a concern for a lot of investors. So would there be any examples that you could give us of how some of your membership base is playing that role in catalytic continuum capital right now to de-risk opportunities or de-risk and unlock other sources of potential capital?
Indeed. I'll just share two examples very, very quickly to illustrate, but I'm sure that there's a lot more that we can share if there's more time. One quick example is what one of our members are currently working on in Myanmar, where together with Proximity Designs and the Ministry of Social Welfare, they are looking to support smallholder farmers in the agricultural supply chain to accelerate access to digital farming tools and also to introduce more transparency and data to keep their participation in the supply chain possible. Some of this activity may well have had already started prior to the pandemic, but certainly when it comes to being able to accelerate more support and engagement once the pandemic is reaching its peak, these kinds of initiatives are the type that will be able to engage interest on the part of social investors as well. Another example that I wanted to give is the work that one of our members in India, Catalyst Foundation, is working on when it comes to the crowding in of different ways that we can help to scale up and seed and scale up inclusive business models that are dealing with the fallout of the pandemic. So Catalyst Foundation started up what's called a COVID Action Collaborative, and what they're doing there is really trying to introduce different ways that corporates, governments, and other forms of social investors can work with inclusive business models and ground operators in India to not only innovate interesting and impactful solutions to support the base of the pyramid through the crisis, but also to scale up pilots that have already been successful to expand their impact urgently and quickly to other parts of to other states and cities in India.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's not easy to work on scaling right now, especially across geographic boundaries with travel restrictions and such. So having that effective work happen on the ground at a time when it's most needed is a big operational challenge that you've clearly found ways and your members have found ways to overcome. So that's very encouraging. I want to turn to Jonathan as well, because you mentioned, Patsy, and kind of a segue to your point on how you're connecting as well some of your investors to policymakers. And I know one of Jonathan's key roles at UNESCAP as Chief of Technology and Innovation is also to work on policy advice. I know that also in your case, Jonathan, spans a broad range of topics from science, technology, and innovation, but social enterprise and inclusive business, I understand, is part of your scope as well when it comes to policy advice. So bearing in mind that not everybody on this session has participated in the policy-oriented sessions of the Inclusive Business Summit this morning, maybe you can help us recap, I guess, what are the key policy issues that governments are looking at right now to support inclusive business, and how can they best do that? How can they best prioritize right now at a time of such need?
Great, thank you, Susan. And yeah, you're right. I'll be focusing more on government policy. And essentially, we've been supporting many governments in the region on impact investing policy, where we've had a very fruitful collaboration with and indeed fun partnership with ABPN and Patsy in particular over the past few years. I think in terms of government policy, I think the first thing I would start with is by saying governments are starting to take impact investing very, very seriously as a tool to meet the ambitions of the SDGs. Just a couple of years ago, the 62 member states of Asia Pacific in something called the Regional Roadmap for the Implementation of the SDGs, committed to developing enabling environments for impact investing through a UN resolution. Very first time impact investing had been in a UN resolution. So for us humble UN officials, it was a bit of a champagne moment in that respect. And since then, it's been fair to say there's been kind of an explosion of impact investing policies, particularly in Asia. And I will focus more on impact investing and the supply side policies rather than the demand side, looking at how governments have harnessed inclusive business and social enterprises examples, because that will be well covered in the other sessions. But essentially, governments can play, to use kind of a very simple framework, a role in three roles: as a market facilitator, as a market regulator, and as a market participant. And this is a framework we've developed alongside OECD and GSG, the Global Steering Group on Impact Investing, to really start making impact investing policy for governments more kind of science than art, shall we say, and putting some sort of framing around that. So to give you kind of briefly a few examples of sorts of policies that have been put in place around market facilitation, we've seen many countries starting to put in place impact investing policies and strategies. So more kind of roadmaps to guide a country's direction in terms of impact investing. We've seen many dedicated central units starting to crop up within government. So, for example, in Indonesia, the SDG Financing Lab, we've recently been supporting the development of a National Advisory Board for Impact Investing in Bangladesh, which is a board made up of the Ministry of Finance, impact investors, mainstream investors, etc., to really have much more of a multi-stakeholder approach to developing strategy and policies to guide impact investing's evolution in Bangladesh in that instance. I suppose governments can also play kind of facilitation role as through impact stock exchanges. So just a few years ago, we developed something called the Social Impact Exchange, in Malaysia, which was an online platform that linked investors with social purpose organizations, shall we say, with the ambition for investments to be made through that mechanism. In terms of market regulation, of course, we've seen some legislation go through, which has been quite exciting to watch. Here in Thailand, where I'm based, the Thai government passed a royal decree that gave 100% tax breaks to investors in organizations that had a social purpose, as an example, which is really around the world quite a revolutionary policy in this space. In terms of kind of voluntary regulations, again, there are many voluntary codes around investments that have social and environmental safeguards, Japan, Korea, China being examples. But in Cambodia, they have the Sustainable Finance Initiative there. In terms of a market participant, of course, governments, if they have the money, can provide access to capital. I mean, we've seen this in Korea, which is kind of a very well-evolved social economy, shall we say, where they have the Korea Inclusive Finance Agency, which gives 100% guarantees on loans to inclusive and social businesses. So I think there's a lot to be learned from outside of the ASEAN region, from especially Korea, which has really been at the forefront of the social economy agenda, of which, of course, inclusivity has a dimension. Of course, the things we know about, we've seen green bonds occurring. And indeed, in Malaysia, and with technology cropping up several times today, they have a Malaysia Green Technology Financing Scheme, which again, may be an opportunity for inclusive businesses to tap into. In addition to kind of access to capital, I suppose, impact procurement can play a role. We've seen that in Korea, and indeed impact commissioning. So I think recently in Malaysia, they developed a social outcomes fund for Malaysia, which is more of a payment by results type model, which again may be an opportunity for inclusive businesses to tap into in that respect. So that's kind of just a snapshot of kind of the sorts of policies we've seen around the region. But I think there's a point I always stress when I talk about government policy for impact investing, is that we're still at the very early stages in the evolution of government policies for impact investing. I always say government policymakers who are making policy in this field will be seen as the forefathers and mothers of this agenda in 10, 50, 100 years to come. So I think at this stage, I think we need to continue to experiment with policies. Sometimes put in place legislation, sometimes not. How did the CSR law go in India, etc.? I think certainly we need to continue to innovate. But we also need to really prioritize the evaluation of these policies as well, so that we can, with some confidence, as particularly for SCAP, as people who advise governments on impact investing policy, we can go in there with some sort of evidence base as to what our advice would be for a country to do, given their culture, context, and level, if you like, of financial system maturity. I'll stop there. Thank you. I think you're muted, Susan.
Yeah.
Oh, let's try that again, Susan. There we go.
You're
back.
I was unmuting and it was remuting itself. So apologies for the lag there. No, it's fantastic to hear so many examples, Jonathan. I mean, concrete, tangible examples of what governments are doing to play all of those functions, regulate, facilitate, especially facilitate. I want to make sure we leave time for all of the panelists to start with their initial comments, but could you just tell us quickly, maybe in a couple of sentences, what have been some of the common denominators? I mean, given that we're a panel representing a lot of private sector investments and all of the policy initiatives and recommendations that are put into place are coming from governments, are there any lessons learned or any best practices that you're seeing so far that came out of the discussion this morning on how to make sure that the private sector participates actively?
No, absolutely. I think kind of co-creation and partnership with the private sector is the key thing. And I look at the work we're doing currently in Bangladesh around developing this National Advisory Board for Impact Investing. We felt that it was very important to have a senior official from the Ministry of Finance chairing that National Advisory Board to chart the path, if you like, for impact investing. But equally, we wanted private sector investors, impact investors, etc., to be part of that conversation and be part of that board. And I think that's especially important, given that you want these initiatives and these to survive the political changes that happen. And I think why the Ministry of Finance official may change, hopefully the private sector people would have that continuation and that consistency for policies to survive political shocks, how we say. So that will be the key learning from us, and kind of around engaging them and creating more formal platforms for them to do this, where the private sector can actually get face time with the ministries of finance and senior officials to help kind of influence that policy in that way.
Yeah, no, fantastic, fantastic. Definitely the private sector is there despite government changes. So that is really important to see what the lasting impact it can be to continue to crowd in the money that's available to invest in these solutions. We're going to focus now on a special subtopic. It's not really a subtopic, but within impact investing, of course, none of the impact can be fully achieved if we don't pay special attention to the inclusion of women in the impact investing models and the gender aspect, particularly for investors who are looking for opportunities to invest with a gender lens and promote women's empowerment. And to cover aspects of that topic, we're going to turn to Jennifer, who's representing the CF. Jennifer, CF has been doing investing in emerging markets using equity instruments primarily, as I understand, in funds across 30, 40 countries. I understand more than 400 investments in your portfolio, but it's only relatively recently, as I understand, that you've entered into some partnerships with DFAT and UNESCAP itself to develop a gender scorecard or a gender tool that can again help investors better measure, better track the outcomes and impact of inclusive business investing when they're looking for a gender lens. So could you tell us a little bit more about the tool, how it's developed, how you're deploying it, how it works to support investors who are looking for this kind of investment angle?
Sure, Susan, I'd be happy to. And good afternoon, good morning, everyone listening in. I think maybe it might be helpful, Susan, to take a step back and talk a little bit about CEF's a women's economic empowerment journey. As you mentioned, we are a global impact investment firm. We were established in 1989. We've got 30 offices around the world across Asia, Eastern Europe, MENA and Latin America. And from an inclusive business perspective, we've always seen SMEs as being a vital factor in improving local communities and are committed to empowering entrepreneurs to achieve both their financial and social success. And working with entrepreneurs, we also see that we have a role to play in developing the entrepreneur ecosystem around them in the countries where we're operating. For the women's economic empowerment side, which is the area I lead in CEF, we've always looked at it as a key theme within our work because of our belief that women play such a vital role in supporting their communities, whether that's as entrepreneurs, community leaders, employees, suppliers, and consumers around the different businesses within their countries. And of those 400 investments you mentioned, around 75 of those have been in this women's economic empowerment area. And as Jonathan alluded to, we have the 17 SDG goals that I think all of us are working towards. And we do see women's economic empowerment as being essential to our ability to deliver all of those goals. And we're actually very honored to be working with you and ASCAP as our strategic partner now in Asia in this area, and have been working quite closely with Jonathan's team at looking at avenues to bridge the gaps in funding for women's entrepreneurship. So as you mentioned, as investors, we do have an ability to influence entrepreneurs, but we see in this region, even with the high level of women's business ownership, women are facing a number of additional disadvantages that are hampering their potential as entrepreneurs, which include things like social and cultural norms, still gender stereotypes which exist, lack of access to decision making, and in many cases, unequal access to resources, including financing. And that's true now more than ever with the COVID pandemic upon us. In the field, we're finding that governments that are causing their COVID stimulus for SMEs through the banking system, that even where they put in place more relaxed eligibility requirements for SMEs, it's still precluding women's entrepreneurship. And also there's a lack of entrepreneurial support mechanisms, and that's a limiting factor in the ability of entrepreneurs supporting women to make it through the crisis. And women are also playing these multiple roles, and that's causing undue stress as women are balancing that greater pressure from work and care responsibilities with their children, learning from home, they're working from home, and they've got other extended family members to think about. So what's SEEF doing about this? In Southeast Asia, we've got dedicated programs that are providing equity financing to businesses supporting women. Susan, as you alluded to, we've been working with DFAT in the Investing in Women program, and there we've made 6 investments in women entrepreneurs across Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. We're now in the process of raising a larger pool of capital that will allow us to finance up to $10 million in women SMEs across the wider Southeast Asian region. And more recently, we finalized a global facility, which will allow us to provide emergency loan financing to businesses supporting women of up to $3 million. That will help support their women employees, but also for the entrepreneurs themselves. It will support their ability to repurpose and retool, redeploy, and better position their businesses for the recovery. And why does this work really matter from the investment perspective, investment world perspective? It really is important for us at the moment to be making that business and investment case for gender smart investing. And the way SEEF is engaging with investors in that area is really to focus in on where gender biases are causing an undervaluation of certain businesses, which are providing opportunities to invest in women, and also to show that we can build value in our investments, both through operational excellence, but more critically by shaping gender equality in the company's leadership and business practices and their workforce policies and compensation. And it was for that later reason on this idea of building value through gender equality that we developed the gender equality scorecard you alluded to. And I'll just quickly pull up one slide on the screen, if I can, to show you a little bit more about the tool. Sorry. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, so from the perspective of the tool, here we have it. It's a way that we can engage with entrepreneurs on these different areas around pay equity, workforce participation, leadership and governance, benefits, professional development, and the other areas mentioned. So it's really talking through with those entrepreneurs where diversity considerations matter in their business. And it's a measurement tool. We use it in screening, due diligence, portfolio management, and also thinking about exit. And it's used globally across the SEEF organization to identify the main opportunities and weaknesses within investments on improving gender equality and company value. So it's a practical and constructive framework to facilitate those conversations on where these gender needs should be addressed within their business. And what we're looking to do in the future, working with SGAP and others, is to develop mechanisms to be encouraging the adoption of this type of scorecard methodology and other women's economic empowerment frameworks across the impact investment and private equity universe. And a belief that our ability to have research being done where we can track gender data, we can analyze it across a wide pool of SMEs, will be a critical factor in encouraging greater investment into this field by actually showing that correlation between diversity and business and investment performance. And through doing that, it will enable us to be closing that gap in financing that exists today for women's entrepreneurship. In the chat afterwards, I will share some links that will allow anyone interested in the tool to go in and get some greater information.
No, thanks, Jennifer. I know that I myself and for EDB's own investing in women-led businesses and looking to promote the agenda of female empowerment through our own investments. It's a tool I myself want to look at in more detail, but it's a great opportunity for investors that are listening to look at it as well, given the importance of the topic. Another important topic, though, that we really need to address as part of the broader topic on impact investing and inclusive business is climate risk, because I guess before the pandemic hit, the need for more investment in climate risk mitigation, adaptation, has been also in the headlines. So I want to pass to John McKinley now from Mekong Strategic Partners. John, this is an issue that I know you're tackling through your firm, both with technical assistance, as I understand, as well as capital that you can deploy to help investors actually fund the climate investments. But I mean, given some of the technical peculiarities with understanding climate risk and measuring climate risk reductions, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the different tools that you're using to provide technical assistance to the banking sector, to your investees, and how you're working to mobilize more capital for the climate risk reduction.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Susan. Thanks a lot. So thank you for inviting us to be here today. It's a pleasure to be here. So we, Mekong Strategic Partners, we're based in Cambodia. We have been here for over 15 years, and we provide investment and advisory services. We invest into, originate and manage infrastructure investments, and we also manage a digital innovation fund looking at startup tech entrepreneur businesses in Cambodia and the region. And I guess getting into your point, one of the new initiatives we're working on is launching a climate facility for Cambodia. The need to develop this institution, I guess, grew out of our experience in Cambodia. We came from the banking sector. The banking sector is kind of our core skill set here. And over the years, we had seen many potentially very positive climate-related projects, whether it's mitigation or adaptation, whether it's a forestry project or a solar project, not really eventuate because they because of a lack of appropriate financing domestically. There was not the tenor and the risk appetite of the banking sector was inappropriate to support the project's development. So projects tended to either be able to access, multilateral concessional financing offshore, or really nothing at all, because the country risk overlay for Cambodia, the pricing was often prohibitive. So there's kind of a domestic market failure, if you like to call it that, in terms of project finance for climate projects at a local level. So that was kind of our inspiration to look to see how we could develop a vehicle which could address that issue. And through this work, basically, it was interesting to hear Jonathan comment previously about our work. We kind of conceptualized and began this work in Cambodia called the Cambodian Sustainable Finance Initiative. It's a partnership work we did with the support of USAID and AFD with the French. And for the last several years, we've been training banks in how to identify and manage and mitigate risk, particularly in environmental and social risk in their portfolios. It's also providing training on products. So how do you have additional lending products which can support climate? So through this work with banks, we decided that there was a gap, and how to best address that gap was we sought out discussions with various partners. Green Climate Fund was one of them, USAID and different development partners, and we decided together with the Cambodian government, who was our kind of major counterpart in this, to explore what kind of institution would best address the the failures in Cambodia, which is similar to our regional neighboring countries as well. There's a similar theme across the region. So this is an institution which is really designed to provide that domestic project finance, to lend to these projects, to catalyze these projects domestically, but also beyond that and this I guess comes into the inclusive side, we don't think there's much point in just being one institution funding one project. We want to take a holistic approach and bring in the local banking sector and have local banks participate in understanding the opportunities in climate finance and how you lend. So we've been providing, through our work with the Cambodian Sustainable Finance Initiative, we've been training banks on products, and so this work's been going on for several years on this journey, and now we're at the point of getting close to launching this institution, and we see an opportunity to use the capital of this institution to incentivize and de-risk local banks, and so we can have a more sectoral approach, if you like, to climate finance. We think there's a lot of interest from European and offshore climate investors and funds from different markets, but their risk appetite and their knowledge of Cambodia or these markets it doesn't match the opportunities. So we think the best source of pipeline development is the local banks and local actors, and mobilizing local savings and community savings to combat climate change, we think is a good thing. So this is the institution, and we have various mechanisms of kind of working with the banks, but providing kind of sustainability linked loans to those institutions, de-risking through credit guarantees, co-financing, the institution taking the most at-risk section. So let's say it's on the construction phase of an infrastructure project before the cash flows would generate, where commercial banks generally don't like to fund. This institution can fund the riskiest tranche at the beginning. Once cash flows come on, commercial banks can take that middle section, which they like, and the back end, this institution could also do. So in terms of structuring co-financing, we think there's many different opportunities, and encouragingly, the government and the banks are very keen on this. Bank sector here like the idea that they're being included in this opportunity. It's not just for the DFIs or the international financial institutions. There's tools and capabilities for them to participate. So they're responding positively, and we're moving along, and we hope to early next year, promote and go take this live, actually. So we're getting close. It's been a while in development, a couple of years at least, but even before that, it started with engaging the banks and engaging local financial institutions and working out where the gaps were. So that's our approach. I mean, we think it has merit being a bit more inclusive, and in terms of pipeline, which is the great challenge a lot of investors face overseas looking to fund these markets, local banks have the pipeline. And so that's our approach, and we hope it's successful.
No, it's given the focus on the need to grow back green. I mean, it's good that you've been working on building this capacity so that it's more ready to deploy as the investments come in and the opportunities to invest now start to reemerge now that banks are starting to lend again after many months of moratorium across the region. I'm conscious of the time, John, because I would love to talk more about climate finance specifically and the impacts of that work, but I want to give Maud a chance to share her perspectives. Sitting now where you are with the GIN, with the Global Impact Investing Network, where you have a broad perspective with global investors, but also from your experience as the former head of Asia Pacific for Responsibility, which we know is one of the premier and early pioneers in impact investing across the region. So can you share with us, building on these areas of opportunity post COVID-19, or now that investment is starting to come in again to rebuild, where you see the challenges for investors in impact investing, inclusive business, and where you see the opportunities? We can start with that.
Sure. And maybe I can reflect, thank you, Susan, and maybe I can reflect a bit on the past decade, right? Because as you rightly mentioned, my experience has been mostly with in private debt, in financial inclusion and climate finance as well. So maybe I start with what Jonathan had said, right? Jonathan mentioned champagne for impact investment, which I like a lot because I'm French and Australian, and it's a wine you can find in both countries. That said, it also gives me an opportunity to ask the question, is the glass of champagne full or half empty, right? And I guess we have many reasons to celebrate today, despite the challenges of the situation. How impact investing has developed in Southeast Asia. And I just start with where I come from, right? Financial inclusion. I think generally it has been a great success. Many more people having access to bank account, but also savings opportunities. And institutions becoming more stable, becoming regulated, becoming banks. And now we see fintechs, and I know we have a speaker talking about fintechs, trying to fill the gaps. Another, let's say, positive sign is that we see many more topics which are actually now tackled by impact investment. And I would refer to the GIN Impact Annual Survey, the 2020 survey, which demonstrates that financial services and microfinance are still the largest sector in terms of allocation of assets. But we see much more asset flowing into climate finance, and John had mentioned it. I think it's roughly a quarter of asset under management in emerging countries. But we have also new and important topics such as agriculture, sustainable value chain, such as healthcare, WASH, which is water of sanitation, education, affordable housing, etc. And as we have seen from our survey, half of the respondents still plan to increase their allocation to these sectors over the next 5 years. One also important topic, it has been discussed by Jennifer already, it's gender-lens investing. It's new, but it's rising fast. It's also close to my heart. And we have seen many initiatives in Southeast Asia on this space. And I'd like to refer to a report done by one of our members, the Sasakawa Foundation in Japan, focusing on gender lens and showing that just in 2020, there have been 23 active private market vehicles in gender lens investing just for East and Southeast Asia. And it's a very positive sign. So if I summarize, today compared to 10 years ago, 10 years ago, probably as an investor, you would probably look at private debt and microfinance. Today, you have a choice. You have really a choice. You can choose different topics. You can choose which sustainable development goal you would like to address. You can choose what environmental and social issue you see as a business opportunity. And you can choose the different type of instrument, private debt, private equity, venture capital, but also public equities and even bonds. Still, is a glass of champagne half full or completely full? Of course, there are still challenges, right? And one of the challenges we see is definitely to bring more impact investors from Asia, right? And here we see some challenges, and one being probably the level of awareness around impact investment. There was a study published a year ago by AVPN and GIN, which talks about reality perception gap about impact investing in Asia. And it covers many topics, right? I mean, one of them being that for some reason, impact investing is quite often put in the same bucket as philanthropy or below market rate investment, which doesn't really reflect the studies we conduct, right? I mean, globally, we see that 70% of investors look for market rate, risk-adjusted return. And actually, when asked whether the impact investment match their expectation, more than 88% of them say that yes, it exceeds their financial expectations. So I think there is a gap here that we still need to address.
Maud, I'm sorry,
yeah.
I'm going to have to cut you off because I want to give Mercy the last word. We have a very hard stop and so many opportunities.
Just one word, impact measurement. There are many methodology today. I just would like to point you to, of course, the ones that is maintained by the GIN called IRIS. It's a public good, it's free, and it gives you really a very good access to how to measure and compare your impact.
Oh, thank you very much. And it's too short a time really to do justice to all the topics we're trying to cover on the panel, but please, Mercy, with the time we have left, help us understand what AFTEC is doing in FinTech, linking it to inclusive business. I mean, fintech, again, has never been more important than ever, with lockdowns and inability to access bank branches, nobody wanting to use cash. So how can your organization play a role in linking these fintech opportunities to the base of the pyramid?
Okay, thank you, Susan. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. And with just a brief of introduction, our association, the Indonesia Fintech Association, or AFTEC, is an umbrella association of fintech, coming from various different verticals. And we are also the official appointed association by the Indonesian Financial Services Authority, helping them in developing the fintech ecosystem and also implementing the market conduct and doing regulatory supervision. I would like to begin by addressing how fintech has supported those at the base of the economic pyramid in Indonesia. So far, the development of fintech industry, with currently more than 23 business models and over 360 licensed fintech startups or providers, have offered easiness and lower transaction fee through adoption of e-money or e-wallet, for example, in the payment system. It has provided access to finance and capital raising activity, fintech in peer-to-peer lending, equity or securities crowdfunding, as well as project financing provide such solution. Fintech has also supported MSMEs and the unbanked population to understand, to make better decisions, as well as to optimize their financing options. We have a variety of verticals, from fintech in innovative credit scoring that uses alternative data from mobile phones, social media, and e-commerce to construct credit profile of the unbanked individual, fintech aggregator that allows comparison of various different financial products offering in order to find one that suits the customer profile the most, and also in financial planner as well as tax and accounting. We have also fintech that provided greater, yes.
I'm sorry, but I'm afraid somebody from UNESCAP might jump in any moment. I think we have a hard stop. I'm wondering, will you be able to share the material in the chat for those in the audience who want to look at the variety of models that you're supporting and better understand?
Sorry. Sure. We just want to emphasize that our association works with the government in promoting the benefit of fintech for the society. We also try to promote more and more fintech adoption to support not only financial inclusion, but also economic inclusion in Indonesia, specifically during this pandemic time for the sake of the national economic recovery. We've seen a lot of growth variety, a lot of adoption in the market, a lot of market potential. The conducive regulatory framework provided opportunities to attract more investment, and we're looking forward to work with the government in promoting that further. So that's where we are.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mercy. And I apologize that we have run out of time for this session. I think if there's one agenda, though, for us to continue, given the organizations that we all represent and the importance of drawing capital into investing in inclusive business models, we have the imperative to keep in touch and find ways to collaborate and partner so that we can all play a role and work closely with those following the agenda today on attracting more capital for inclusive business as one of the rebuilding strategies post-COVID-19. So I just want to thank everybody for the time on the panel today, John, Jennifer, Mercy, and Patsy, and apologies that the time is so short to cover all the ground we had to cover, and look forward to those participating in the rest of the session today with the UNESCAP Inclusive Business Summit. Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, panelists and moderators, for this valuable discussion. We will now start session 4, Inclusive Business and SMEs. The session will be introduced and moderated by Mr. Max Bulakovsky, Policy Analyst at OECD's Center for Entrepreneurship. I would now like to invite Mr. Bulakovsky to open the discussion. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me and see me. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm here today actually replacing Dr. Vimongkang Kuzumas, who was supposed to be here, but unfortunately she cannot join us because of a very important meeting within the ministry. But I'll try to do my best. And today our objective is to speak really about the SMEs and inclusive business. So as you all know, there is a lot of pressure put on SMEs these days. Of course, SMEs are very much affected by COVID, and the presentations earlier today also showcased that actually they are particularly, COVID has particularly affected the micro enterprises and women-led enterprises. And I think there is a lot of hope on the inclusive business in today's agendas. I'm coming from the OECD, and in the OECD, we work a lot together with the policymakers in the region and also with the businesses in the region. And we have supported the ASEAN Coordinating Committee on MSMEs on a number of issues related to policy development. And clearly, one of the things that we have noticed that inclusive business has been already integrated in the ASEAN Strategic Action Plan for MSME development in the region. So we know that policymakers indeed are trying to sort and to follow these things very seriously. So, but what can we do all over? One of the objectives of the inclusive business, of course, is to create an impact, and how we can do. And one way is to identify how inclusive business can support national MSME development objectives. For example, by providing market access and promoting productivity levels at the MSMEs. But another way of looking at it is also through empowering small, medium enterprises to grow, especially those enterprises who have a particular value or particular ADN with promoting inclusive business values. And a lot could be done through capacity building and to growth enabling kind of processes which can help them to grow up. But I'll not spend more time on that because we have a very interesting panel today. And what is really particular, I'm very pleased today, is that we have different people coming from different angles of the whole ecosystem. We have practitioners, we have policymakers, people who promote who represent associations of MSMEs. And I hope that we're going to have very productive discussion around it. So let me introduce you the panel. We have Mr. Oscar Hack, Global Advisors from SMEs, Private Sector and Markets from Oxfam, GB. We have Mr. Sim Shankirarov, CEO of Banji, Cambodia. For those who don't know, Banji has been selected as one of the most promising startups in the tech scene a few years ago. We have Mr. Nguyen Hoang Lan from the Vietnam Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. And we have Christina Teves Braudel, founding and managing director of Endeavor. Endeavor is one of the major consulting companies in the area of business models around inclusive business. So as you see, we have a really very exciting speakers, and without much ado, I would start the discussion. But before that, I want to highlight that though this session is very short, please post your questions on the chat and we will try to pick up. Normally, we will have some time to ask 1 or 2 questions. So that would be really great. So speaking about inclusive business and COVID crisis, Oscar, could you please tell us a bit more how one may support SME recovery from the COVID crisis while promoting on one side inclusive growth, but also helping to build a really inclusive business system, ecosystem.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, thank you everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. So, just as a background, I represent Oxfam. We are, of course, an NGO. We're a civil society organization. Where we are coming at this is through the work that we do with very marginalized producers, women, specifically in the value chain context. So that's sort of our main driver. Now, working along value chains, of course, what we have is along the chain, we have small scale producers that link to small, medium enterprises, then that link to essentially global markets. So this is the chain that we work along. And from that point of view, we've been working in the space, in the region, and we consider businesses to be, we promote inclusive and responsible business practices as a unit. And I would say over the last decade or so, we've been working in the region in terms of supporting the inclusive business environment through social enterprises, etc. Now, what we have been noticing, for example, just to give you a specific example, one of the enterprises that we work with is a seafood processor, specifically in the shrimp value chain, that have thousands of women in their supply chain that basically export the product to the US and to Japan. And they've been specifically focused on the export market in Indonesia for over a decade. We work with them to basically support them in terms of actually making their work that is actually inclusive, where they support women in their supply chains, to be more visible. They would never consider themselves to an inclusive business. Most of the development DFIs would most likely miss these type of businesses. So that's been one of our focus areas, to actually work on the supply in the marketplace. Now, yesterday we were on the phone with the CEO of the company, and because of COVID, they've had a massive negative impact in terms of their business. And this has essentially forced them to basically focus on the domestic market. So they have to now make a tremendous shift to the domestic market. And that's where we basically work with them on that ecosystem through business development service, through consultancy, and through basically working with the producers in their supply chain. So, and that is not, I would say, for us, just a business development service approach. It's also linking that work to the government policies that are being imposed by the Indonesian government, and linking that to the business development service that we are supporting them with. So now our focus, just to conclude, now our focus with this particular company is going to be on developing the domestic market for sustainable shrimp. So that's a big piece of work, but that's what we have to basically engage in as the focus of the company also changes. And that's of course for us, we get a chance to reduce the impact on the small scale producers that are in that supply chain as well. So that's try to put that in a nutshell. So yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I suggest that I see that some of the questions start popping up, and that's really good. I suggest that we will pick up the questions a little bit later, but maybe let me ask a question to the next panelist, Shankirov. So you're the CEO of Banji, an inclusive business that is supporting SME access to affordable accountancy services and finance. I'm really excited because your business is really representing something what I call the second approach, where you can actually help a company grow from a smaller company to becoming something big and really create an IB model and support other companies. So can you please share with us a bit your business models and how you can support micro and small enterprises in your country, please?
Hi, thank you for having me, and good afternoon from Cambodia, so good morning to other people. Banji is what we call ourselves an inclusive fintech, that we trying to address the fundamental challenges of the SME in access to finance, namely the lack of confidence and financial knowledge in preparing a proper financial report, and also the lack of availability and affordability for accountant for micro or rural enterprise. And most of the transaction for the SME are done through cash. So the banking history is very limited. And most importantly is the lack of access to the collateral to borrow the money from the formal financial institution. So these are the challenges that the company, that Banji want to address. I'd like to share the presentation on our model. It's easy for me also to follow through as well. In terms of addressing the financial confidence, we been providing the financial solution for MSME in terms of localized accounting software, in terms of tax and financial report that need to be submitted to the government. And this we designed in two different models. One is for the business in the city, and another one is we designed specifically for the rural enterprise. That's been the major market since the COVID, because most of the business in the city, it go down virtually to zero, and our business in the rural are growing on the daily basis. And we also offer point of sales, billing, and also compliant software to the MSME. But throughout the year, we found out that especially small and micro business only record revenue side. So that's one of the main reasons that the financial report cannot be fully constructed, because the biggest part of the financial report is missing, which is expense. Because to record an expense, you require business require an accounting knowledge. So we in 2017 we launched what we call an innovative bookkeeping service, and this is also an inclusive concept coming in. We contract youth in the rural area, in the village they're living, and it doesn't require a university degree in accounting. They go through our training and they perform bookkeeping for the micro and rural enterprise. And the normal price for the company, for the business to hire an accounting firm, it's 150, but we are able to reduce down to $30 per month. But we only book expense side. Internally, we call an Uber for accountant. So it's easier to understand that way. And on top of that, we also provide financial literacy to the micro and small enterprise. And we only focus mainly on working capital management and cash flow management. So that's the first part that we've been focusing on. And the second one, we also partner with bank and payment company in Cambodia. We already go live with 6 payment and financial institution, and we are getting ready to go live with another 4. Altogether, we have 15 financial institutions as a partner. What we do is that all the invoice they issue on the platform can be paid through the agent-based payment or collection, or through their mobile banking. The most interesting part is that people in the rural area, especially rural enterprise, can accept digital payment. Either their customer in the city or even the rural using the agent-based payment, for example, like Ving or AMK in Cambodia. And the important part is that when the invoice is paid, it's automatically recorded into accounting software. That increases the data integrity that can be used for the lending purpose. So with the proper financial report, we are able to build our alternative credit score. But at the moment, we only used a expert judgment credit score. So there's no statistical model yet. It's still an early stage, but 2 loans already disbursed. Actually, under the project of UNCDF and UNESCAP on the women fintech that we were selected. And under that project, there's 2 loans already disbursed by the commercial bank to the women MSME. What is different in the model is that we build the score for the bank as an alternative credit score, not substituting the national score or credit scores, but give them additional information for loan underwriting. And then we also build a financial monitoring tool that link directly into our software that allow the bank to mitigate the risk. Because this one loan is an unsecured loan. There's 2 loans, one is unsecured and another one is secure. So the bank are more interested to monitor their loan real time rather than waiting 3 to 6 months to receive a financial statement for their monitoring purpose. So that's the whole model of what we are supporting the MSME in Cambodia. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. This is really, really exciting because on one side, we see that you managed to integrate a number of actors into the system. And then I realize also that this model helps to formalize a number of SMEs. And this is one of the big issues of many of the SMEs in the region, that they stay informal and they cannot access financial services because they don't have a appropriate financing kind of systems in place. And this is really really good. I'm for the sake of time, I'm moving to Mr. Lan, who is coming from the NASME, the Vietnam Association of SMEs, that support the development of inclusive businesses in Vietnam and SME development. And I just wanted to because there was also a relevant question. We note that on one side, what the government could do, should the government provide dedicated resources in order to support SMEs, in order to prioritize SMEs that have a specific impact. So how do you do it in Vietnam?
Thank you so much, Mr. Max, and hi everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. And as you all mentioned from the beginning of the conference, it is in the world, including ASEAN and Vietnam. And in Vietnam, about 70,000 businesses have suspended their operations or closed down. And this actually affected about 31 million workers in our countries. Among them, we find that small and medium enterprises, the government has been issuing many policies to support these businesses and their employees, such as the $13 billion low interest credit package, the $8 billion tax incentive, the $3 billion cash to support the poor and workers without jobs, and also the $500 million package on electricity bills, and many others. Up to now, I think the government of Vietnam has implemented those support packages quite successfully, and this actually helps businesses and people maintain their operations. A noteworthy point is that after experiencing the COVID-19, the first COVID-19 wave, the government of Vietnam has changed their way of preventing the pandemic from a strict social distancing to a focused isolation method. This measure has effectively ensured Vietnam to prevent the pandemic and also restore the economy at the same time. In phase one, to serve as a basis to issue second round support packages. And now, as for VINA SME, we are a non-governmental organization representing 97% of the total companies in Vietnam. And I think in ASEAN, the small and medium enterprises are the majority of businesses in your country as well. We have actively coordinated with ministries, agencies, and localities to communicate with businesses and employees. And since June this year, we have organized nearly 10 national conferences and seminars in which we were able to gather many valuable initiatives from businesses and employees to the government. We also successfully pursued the National Assembly to agree on context for SMEs in 2020. And this is a very strong commitment from the National Assembly was a very big win for the business community in Vietnam. And I also hope this will be it's not a lesson, but maybe an experience for other ASEAN countries to look at and see how we have done to gain the 30% reduction on income tax, corporate income tax for SMEs. And you know, we also worked very closely with ministries to cut down a lot of administrative procedures that causes difficulties for both domestic and foreign companies. And the last thing is how we have promoted IB in Vietnam is actually we see that IB inclusive businesses have certain advantages over SMEs in terms of experience, market, supply chain, and the ability to withstand external influences. Therefore, what we are trying to help them is to further expand the market of partners and customers through proposing the government to allow localities to expand the pilot model of nighttime economy. I'm sure you all have heard about nighttime economy, and this is the focus point that we are trying to do in Vietnam. We also support IBs to optimize their export to the markets where Vietnam have signed a free trade agreement with, including the EVFTA that have just been effective on the 1st of August this year. In addition to supporting IBs to optimize their export, we also create a channel for SMEs to become satellites in the supply chain of IBs. You know, IBs, the inclusive business, they have experience, so they go ahead with, you know, with new markets. They have new contact with other businesses from outside of Vietnam, and they create a supply chain for our SMEs to join. So both of them will have income, but at the same time, SMEs will have the opportunity to experience those markets in a roadmap, in a certain roadmap, and they will not be very like lonely, or they will not find too much difficulties in this context of COVID-19. So that's all the, it's just some examples of how Vietnamese government have done to support SMEs and IBs in Vietnam. And also we as Vina SME, the representative of the majority of enterprises in Vietnam, that's how we have done. And we hope in very soon in the near future, other ASEAN countries, we are a community, so we can share with each other how the government has done to support those victims of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lam, for this summary. As I already mentioned, indeed, the governments in ASEAN are taking this very seriously, and a number of policy documents have been adopted. Also, what I've learned from your intervention is that it's very important to provide finance. It's very important to provide really capacity building support, as well as involve a variety of national stakeholders in order to make these things happen. That's what we also try to see, at least, for example, from at the OECD, we have developed a number of tools in order to support this collaboration between different stakeholders. I will just make a reference to one tool which is free and available for everyone, which is called the Better Entrepreneurship Policy Tool. It's an area where a number of stakeholders can come together and identify out of 6 or 7 areas what are the strong points of their specific ecosystem that they have at the city level or the national level, and can work together with the policymakers in order to promote it and work specifically on that area. It also gives some specific policy reference, and it's absolutely for free. I think at some point I'll put the web page on it. But let's go specifically to this, to the ways how businesses can involve SMEs more into their value chain. I'm very happy to greet Christina, who is the founder and managing director of Endeavor, a firm providing advice on the development of inclusive business models. You have over 20 years of experience in working with within this area, and you have recently even published a study on how large firms can help SMEs to build high-performing value chains in developing markets. So what is your view on the opportunities that inclusive business can bring for SME development?
Yeah, thank you very much, Max, for the kind introduction. And it's very nice to be speaking here in Asia today from home in Munich. As you said, at Endeavor, we've been working on inclusive business now for more than 13 years, and a lot of that work has been in Asia. And in the past couple of years, we focused more on a system innovation lens for how this inclusive approach can help us fix the bigger systems. So I thought today I want to share with you as a complement to what the other speakers have said, and thanks for all these really interesting presentations with a more Asian lens. I would share something a bit more conceptual from the recent report that you mentioned, and I'm just going to share this one core graphic from that report. So it explores how companies can take a more systemic approach to working and strengthening SMEs in their value chain. And this really came out of a demand from a number of large companies that approached us and Business Fights Poverty to see what is a more scalable approach to working with SMEs. I mean, SMEs are part of any value chain, be it as suppliers or manufacturers or in the delivery or in retail or in services. So this is not really new and not necessarily particularly inclusive. Where it becomes inclusive is when companies really take purposeful action to help these SMEs overcome some of the barriers in the ecosystem. And they do that out of responsibility, but also and mainly to strengthen their own value chains and become more resilient. Because in many places, companies cannot find enough well-performing SMEs to really have a functional value chain. And this is because of the ecosystem, and it's been mentioned before. So SMEs find it difficult to access finance, skills and information. The regulatory environment may not be so conducive, so they might prefer to stay informal, or they might just find it difficult to formalize. Then markets and networks might not be available to them. So many SMEs struggle to survive, let alone to grow. And traditionally, what companies have done then was to fix the very problem they have been facing with their SMEs. So maybe to provide advanced finance, or to provide them with some training so they can deliver the quality that is needed in the value chain. And a rather new approach that we've been exploring in this publication is to work more collaboratively with partners to really fix the problems, rather than just to kind of brush over or put a tape, just to really go deeper and fix the issues in the ecosystem. And one example that I really like that illustrates it very well is from Unilever in Kenya, where they partnered up with MasterCard and Kenya Commercial Bank to support small retailers in their value chain to access finance. So Unilever is actually not giving them any advance finance, but they are giving Visa the information about what these small companies procure from Unilever, and that builds a credit profile that allows the Kenya Commercial Bank to grant these small retailers credit. With the credit, they can stock more, they can sell more, they can get a bigger credit to stock even more, and they grow. And this model is basically unlimited because everybody wins. So there's not this constraint, I can only fund so and so many SMEs, and then I'm out of cash, even as a large company. It's a functional business model that really allows these SMEs to grow and thrive. Yeah, and the same logic applies to other potential partners. That's the outer circle that you see there. So impact investors can play a role, or civil society organizations, or also governments. So there's more examples in the report on different constellations. And I think the good news right now is that SME development, especially now in the COVID-19 crisis, has become a priority of everyone, basically. So governments really prioritize SME survival, first of all, and then growth. Impact investors already have a lot of money in the game to support SMEs for return objectives and social objectives. And then, of course, large companies want to see them grow in order to have resilient value chains. So there is a really good opportunity for companies to take this more external perspective and to open up and seek partnerships rather than trying to fix the issues all by themselves. Yeah, and in this way, set off that growth trajectory. So if you want to learn more about this approach, it's a guide that's available also for download on the website, and I'll share the link. So the questions on the sides to kind of take you through how this can work. But I think the core change here is really the change in perspective from looking at, I need to fix the problem as the company and working directly with SMEs, to looking more externally and seeking out partnerships with others that share the goals of seeing SMEs thrive.
Thank you very much, Christina. I will actually, we have a little bit of time, so we rushed a little bit through the entire process, but I wanted to maybe continue with you because I think you responded to one of the questions that we've seen in the chat about the need for the government to prioritize within their SME policies, some sector somehow prioritize social impact that SMEs could create. And I noticed that you mentioned some specific studies, and if other speakers want to have some ideas or comments on that, you would be also welcome to join later. Maybe would you mind referring to your response to that question in one way? It was from Armin.
Yeah, and thanks, Armin, for raising the question on the role of government. Of course, government is the big scaler in the game. So if there's incentives, then everything can grow much quicker than if it's just company initiative. And we recently supported the Global Steering Group for Impact Investing on mapping out policies in the Asia region on how governments are already supporting inclusive businesses in the region. And actually the majority of these policies is tied in with SME policies. So typically it's an SME policy that is kind of enhanced with a social impact objective. And one interesting policy that I put in the chat here, because Armin also asked about the financial aspect, is the public procurement policy in Seoul, of the Seoul city, to procure from social enterprises, preferably. So public procurement is a huge lever to get SMEs ahead, and a very smart way, I would say, because they're not spending extra, they're enabling these SMEs to be part of formal value chains, but also rewarding the social impact that they are seeking to create. And there's many good examples. I think the report hasn't been published, but it should be out soon.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Christina. And I'm a big supporter of social enterprises, as some of the people who know me probably know that. I just want to highlight that in some cases, people mix social enterprises and inclusive businesses, and it's not necessarily the same thing. Some social enterprises could be part of the inclusive business model, but not all social enterprises are implementing inclusive business models. So that's something that has to be kind of clear. And in the policy guidelines endorsed by the ministers in ASEAN, we actually provide definitions for different groups. One of the elements, I think, what is also important, that indeed that maybe in many cases, governments could support social enterprises because they have this the necessary ADN that can go in the same line, at least some of the social enterprises that can develop and grow into the inclusive business model. Any other speakers would like to add something? Would maybe Oscar or Lan would like to mention something from the examples that you have seen from the territory and the ground?
Yeah, sure. One of the examples recently, I mean, and as you're saying, there are many examples of inclusive businesses and responsible businesses in Asia. One of the most recent examples where we're working in the rice value chain is a model that maybe the speaker was here earlier this morning, but a model that is a public-private and producer partnership model, where it actually engages the producers through the agriculture value chain to have ownership in the enterprise. So it creates a pathway for income generation and wealth development for the SME, and at the same, for the producers, I'm sorry, and actually, as Christina was saying, gives them, basically locks them into a good supply, supply resiliency, basically. So that's been a fantastic model that I've seen in Cambodia. So we are trying to then sort of, make that more visible, and then take that across and apply that to some of the businesses we work with in Indonesia, for example, in the shrimp supply chain. Maybe next year we can come back and tell you how that works out. But so that's one example.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Lan, I was just wondering, in Vietnam, to your knowledge, is there a distinction between the way we can, some SMEs get support, or some social enterprises get support from the government, or maybe enterprises that have a social, that create more social impact have easier access to finance? Or is it something that you've been considering so far, or there's nothing happening?
There are actually no difference between social impact companies and SMEs or inclusive business in Vietnam in terms of supporting policies. So far, as I know, they are all in a certain situation that they have never seen before, just because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the government of Vietnam is trying to help all businesses in Vietnam, but they focus on MSME and inclusive business. For those who are social impact companies, we have a specific policy for them, but at the moment they are not very special in terms of the incentive that we give to business in Vietnam. But all we are trying to do is to connect social impact companies, inclusive business, and MSME together to overcome the challenges of COVID-19. But to make sure in Vietnam, the definition of inclusive business and social impact companies are very common, they're very similar to each other. We have no different definition for those models. So that is one of our missions, to make it clear to the society and to the business community that what model they are looking for, and how they will be supported by the government based on their business models.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to highlight that at OECD, we have dedicated in-depth reports on how it is possible precisely to support policies promoting social enterprises and inclusive entrepreneurship. And they're available online, so policymakers can read about it. But I would like to use the last 2 minutes maybe to ask a last question to the practitioner, to someone who represents really the real sector. Shankiriro, just a question. When you were growing, what actually helped you to grow? Was it the private sector, or you also received support from the government, and what you would like to get as a business in terms of support? And I realize we only have like 2 minutes left, so short answer would be appreciated.
Thank you. While we growing mainly partnership with the financial institution and the business association, that's a lot of support from that side, and also allow us to understand that our business model was not the right one. We start off by giving away the software for free for 2 years. We burn a few $100,000. And later on, we realized that free not really the business model. So we changed the model and then focusing pretty much on micro and small enterprise, and then start charging. And that's the quality of data coming in. And then we go into the bookkeeping, and also finally the lending is happening. For the government, at the moment, the government are looking into various incentives for the inclusive business. But what, for me as a company, I think it's just an endorsement from the government that we are the inclusive business. That would be, at this moment, is very good enough for us to work with other development agency and also with other financial partner, because that's the credibility that provided by the government for us to proceed further. Because in the COVID situation and due to the limited resource in Cambodia, I think the more of the grant, more of the fund from the government and financial support will go to a most impacted sector, such as tourism and other sector. So I think that just a recognition and endorsement from the government would be good enough for this point for us to grow further.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I see that indeed there is an IB accreditation that has been put in place, and this is a powerful tool also for government to endorse a number of inclusive businesses. I think the policy guidelines adopted at ASEAN also makes a reference and provides a way to do it. So with this, I think we are all more or less at the end of the session, maybe just very few points. I think what is important that we've seen that following COVID, indeed, SME development became a priority for many of the actors. So not only from the government side, but also for the impact investors, it has become kind of an interesting opportunity to contribute. And on one side, we can work with bigger companies in helping them facilitate, integrate the SMEs into their global value chain, but also we can help smaller companies, smaller entities to grow, to become inclusive businesses. It is important to collaborate, and there are different tools and ways to involve various stakeholders in the policy making, and it's important to hear from the private sector. I also take it from here that finance is still an important issue, and when developing dedicated programs, maybe governments should prioritize SMEs that develop a societal social impact, and that capacity building is still a very important thing. And finally, it's important to promote the concept of inclusive business among SMEs and promote the accreditation. So voila, so I think that's the end of this session. I would like to thank the speakers for their great remarks. It has been a great pleasure to be here, and I think it was a very nice session. So I learned a lot as well. So I would like to give you a virtual round of applause, and we go further with the summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Budakovsky, and thank you, panelists, for this wonderful, valuable dialogue. We are now going to have a 15-minute pause and return at 3:45 p.m. Bangkok time in meeting room 2 for the next session. So if you have your participant guide open in front of you, I think the screen share should be showing up any minute now. It looks like there's a bit of a delay, but what it will say when it comes up, which it has now, is for you to switch to room 2. Again, you can find the link to room 2 in your participant guide, as well as in the chats. Doreen Nguyen has just posted the link a few minutes ago. I'm going to paste it again here. Please go ahead and save this link, copy and paste it, put it in your browser, and meet us in room 2. This room will remain open for until 3:45 p.m. Bangkok time in case you need further assistance in meeting us there. Thank you again for your participation. Have a good break and see you in room 2 at 3:45 p.m. Bangkok time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We will be getting started in just a minute. Welcome to session 5, Guidelines for the Promotion of Inclusive Business in ASEAN. We will be getting started in just a few minutes here. It's now 5:45 p.m. in Bangkok. And just want to share another reminder. One is that it's been really great to see all the active engagement in the chats in the previous sessions. Please continue to share your inputs, comments, and questions in the chat and keep up the conversation. Also wanted to remind you that the materials that are being shared by panelists and our speakers and moderators will be made available on the summit, the official summit website in the coming days. Let me share the URL to the website once again in case you need it, ASEANIBSummit2020.com. So over the next few days, please do check the website and see that the messages will, that the materials will be shared there. Okay, I've just received the go-ahead to get started for session 5. Welcome back once again. We will now start session 5, Guidelines for the Promotion of Inclusive Business in ASEAN. The session will be introduced and moderated by Mr. Markus Dietrich, Director for Policy, IBAN. I would now like to invite Mr. Dietrich to open the discussion. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Irene. A very warm welcome to the final session of the day, discussing the guidelines for the promotion of inclusive business in ASEAN. As said, my name is Markus Dietrich. I'm the Policy Director of the Inclusive Business Action Network. We aim to scale inclusive business through supporting the development of IB policies, impact investment readiness, and through our platform, www.inclusivebusiness.net. What an interesting conference it has been so far. I got up, together with Irene, by the way, at 3 o'clock in the morning to follow it. And we had, and it was great to see the development. It's really moving ahead. And it's not only moving ahead on the financial side, on the business side, but also on the policy side. And this is what this session is all about. Over the next hour and 15 minutes, this panel of esteemed policymakers from the region will present the brand new guidelines for the promotion of inclusive business in ASEAN, highlighting the opportunities for collaboration of ASEAN institutions on IB promotion and provide examples of the application of the guidelines on a national level now and in the future. So let me welcome the speakers. We've got with us today Mr. Bunchung Duangsavan, the AXME Chair and Director General, Department of SME Promotion, Ministry of Industry and Commerce, and Lao PDR. Mr. Vantu Chorn, Deputy Director of Planning, Statistics, Cooperation, and Affairs at the Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology, and Innovation from Cambodia. Ms. Victoria Simanung Kalit, Deputy Minister for Production and Marketing, Ministry of Cooperatives and SMEs, Indonesia. Mr. Tam Jirong, Deputy Director from the Singapore Center for Social Enterprises. We've got Ms. Trinh Huong, Director of Policy Development, Agency for Enterprise Development, Ministry of Planning and Investment, Vietnam. And Ms. Norlila Suaili, Head of Business Advisory and Services, Darussalam Enterprises, Brunei Darussalam. So let's get started. Mr. Buntong Duangsavan, AXME has been at the forefront of promoting inclusive business in ASEAN. This year, through the development of the guidelines for the promotion of IB in ASEAN, which were endorsed only 4 weeks ago by the ASEAN economic ministers. Please take the opportunity to introduce the guidelines to the audience.
Thank you, Marcus. This is my second intervention at this Inclusive Business Summit. This morning we've heard success stories on inclusive business from ASEAN member states that are in a more advanced stage of inclusive business promotion. So we acknowledge IBAN contribution and support in promotion of inclusive business in the ASEAN region. Many of us are aware that the guideline for the promotion of the inclusive business in ASEAN was endorsed at the 52nd ASEAN Economic Meeting on the 25th August 2020. As our moderator mentioned that about 4 weeks ago. I understand that many of you have seen the guideline itself. Endorsement of the guideline is a culmination of SME initiative in promoting awareness of IB in ASEAN since 2018 with support of IBAN, OECD, and UNESCAP. In this regard, I would like to express our appreciation to SME members, IBAN, OECD, and UNESCAP for their hard work and support in developing and finalizing the guideline. The concept of IB is really new in the ASEAN region. And thus we started with the capacity building program for IB focal point in ASEAN, which produced a kind of report that was acknowledged by the leader of ASEAN last year. And in pursuing the various initiatives in previous year, it was recognized that the integration of IB into national policy and its implementation require consolidated effort from various ministries. And this year, we decided that educational and promotional effort need to be intensified and continue to raise awareness among policymakers and business people. And the idea of developing the guideline was mooted to be common reference document on IB that can be shared widely among policymakers and businesses in ASEAN, and also to assist in putting in place enabling environment for inclusive business. And that guideline for promoting this inclusive business was one of the policy priority for Vietnam ASEAN Chairmanship 2020. The guideline itself, as a reference document, the guideline defines IB model, adopted from G20 definition of inclusive business, and it provides step-by-step guidance on how IB model could be promoted at the national level and institutional setup required to support inclusive business in the country. And the guideline also provides suggestions for regional and alignment of inclusive business in ASEAN regional priorities. The guideline introduced or has 11 policy instruments to be considered by ASEAN member states. They range from formulating strategies for IB enabling environment, aligning IBs with MSME development strategies, institutionalizing and the required setup to support inclusive business, accreditation of inclusive business and with IB models, to monitoring and reporting inclusive business strategies. At the regional level, the guideline advocates cross-sectoral promotion of inclusive business by aligning the IB to ASEAN's social development agenda. The guideline also encourages continuous effort to promote IB through exchange of knowledge, and closely collaborating with the private sector. For example, ASEAN Bank and its Joint Business Council. The guidelines also include a award for inclusive business. The guideline proposed criteria for nomination and selection of inclusive business through the use of access, social impact of the business. The criteria used to recognize businesses at both national and regional level, and the guideline was developed, or we receive assistance to develop the guideline from OECD, and we would like to express our appreciation to OECD for assistance in developing the criteria for selection and nomination and selection of the board. ACME is pleased to receive support from ASEAN Business Advisory Council in acknowledging outstanding inclusive business in the region by including the ASEAN Inclusive Business Award category in its upcoming ASEAN Business Award 2020. We hope that the recognition would inspire more medium and large businesses to embrace the inclusive business model, be innovative, live financial benefits, while at the same time contribute to growth of micro and small enterprises, as well as to the people at the base of the economic pyramid. So that would be my initial introduction to the ASEAN, the guideline for the promotion of inclusive business in ASEAN. I look forward to further discussing with you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for introducing the guidelines to us and the audience. I think it's worth noting that those guidelines were developed based on the experiences in the last 2 years of policy development on a national level. So they are very practical. They are based on actual experiences in the ASEAN member states. And so we are taking now the deep dive to some of those national governments, so they can share what actually happened on the ground, which then ended up to be summarized in the guidelines. And those guidelines will be of benefit, not only to ASEAN member states, but way beyond, because it's a real practical examples that other regions and geographies can adopt. And I would like to express a special welcome to the policymakers from Nigeria and Zambia who are joining this conference to exactly do this, learn from the ASEAN experiences. So let us now go to Cambodia. Vantu. Cambodia has embraced inclusive business and developed IBEC, the IB Enabling Environment in Cambodia strategy, through an IB landscaping process, which is explained in the guidelines. Can you share with us Cambodia's path towards developing its IB strategies and the insights you gained?
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you for letting me participating in this important IB Summit today. I am Vantu from Ministry of Industry, Science and Technology, and I'm working closely in developing the IB policy in Cambodia. To start with, I cannot thank enough to our partnership and our leaders who have always supporting us, especially UNSCAP, IBAN, and also other supporting local partners. It's been a long way for Cambodia after we have the chance to get in touch, engage in the IB policy training supported by IBAN, which is the initiative from ASME. And in the process of developing the IB policy, we experienced a very supporting institution from our line ministries and also private sector, because the IB concept is, although it is pretty new to Cambodian way of thinking, but we finally can sell to them. Because why? Because it is a triple win strategy. Win for the government, win for the people, and win for the whole society. There are some bottlenecks that I would like to express. In developing the IB strategy in Cambodia, we experiencing some institutional different idea which mean that because of the different way of thinking and expressing new concept, we found that the process has been delayed, but at the end of the day, we can convince those institutions to accept our idea. And another important keynote that we found is the level of awareness raising. It's been really encouraging for Ministry of Industry, Science and Technology, that when we talk to various institutions like the key Ministry of Economy and Finance, Ministry of Commerce, and the Board of Investment, we found that they need such kind of policy to integrate into our existing national development strategy plan, so that we can accelerate more economic scale development. And there is one more issue that I would like to raise here, is that the way of our coordination method is still at some level that we need more assistance from our partner to help us in the coordination method. And that's what we have found support from the UN SCAP and IBAN. And we have finally produced the draft of the strategy and talked to our top leader for endorsement. And we are now in the positive sign to go on, to move on, to finish, to finalize our strategy by 2020. Not just strategy, but we are working with the private sector who are really keen to go to change their business model into IB, and they are now becoming our public-private partnership to improve their business condition and also to enlarge the impact for our own society. So far, Cambodia is ready to promote more awareness raising, but we would like to emphasize the very coordinated support from our partner and also our leader. Without your support, we cannot move until today's result. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you very much, Van Tu, and it has been well noted. I think what's interesting what you mentioned about the need to convince others to form coalitions to drive the IB agenda forward and the need to coordinate it in a good way, as well as getting the private sector on board in some kind of institutional way. Let us now move to Indonesia. Ms. Victoria Simanukkalit, Indonesia has been looking at inclusive business in the wellness tourism industry. Can you elaborate on your experience in developing a sectoral perspective on IB promotion in Indonesia?
Thank you. Wellness tourism in Indonesia is one of the 4 health tourism industry clusters, where the others are medical tourism, sport tourism, and health scientific tourism. Generally, the tourism industry in Indonesia is managed by large or big company in order to provide services and tourism products, which match to the taste and demand of the tourist at the competitive price. This often causes the surrounding community, including micro and small businesses, only become as outsiders and do not enjoy the added value of these tourism activities. So the government and also many entrepreneurs now who care about the environment are starting to think about how the people around the tourism industry also can enjoy the added value of the tourism activities, then can support the industry in sustainable manner. Indonesia has started implementing the inclusive businesses model in wellness tourism industry in collaboration with various parties, including large companies, and also now compiling a roadmap for developing an inclusive business model in wellness tourism sector. Indonesia, as we know, as the world's largest archipelagic country, realized that the potential of richness of various spice plants as a raw materials for spa, health and beauty products, as well as herbal food and beverage. Farmers who produce these raw materials, also micro, small enterprises who produce food and herbal drinks and play in services such as spa are generally micro-scale business and in pure condition. Through IB program, IB model, large company provide assistance for farmers to produce quality and organic raw materials, as well as empower micro and small business to produce healthy, safe, and standardized herbal drinks and food, and also spa products, as well as become an off-taker of this product. With empowerment like this, micro and small business can develop in sustainable manner along the development of large industry. This company, also this big company, also trains young people who wants to become business players supporting the wellness tourism so that this industry can develop in line with the increasing income of the surrounding community and reducing poverty. Indonesia has been looking and realized enormous potential in inclusive business in the wellness tourism industry. However, in Indonesian economic system, inclusive business policy has not yet been imposed in national policy for all sector. It means that it has not explicit developed in IB. So there is no national regulation or roadmap yet. In adopting inclusive business, of course, there are some challenges to implement IB in Indonesia. There are, firstly, limited knowledge and information on inclusive business among government and business people. Second, less convinced that inclusive business approach as a promising business model to promote low-income communities. Third, limited participation of large company or private sector to involve the inclusive business. And the last one, limited collaboration between government and private sectors. To solve this challenging, now we provide IB capacity development program in collaboration with GIZ. So we collaboration with other parties to try to improve, to try to implement the IB model, so our government, Indonesian economic can grow fairly with the others people. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for detailing the sectoral approach to inclusive business. I think it's very worthwhile sharing those experiences, as the tourism industry and the wellness industry is a growing segment with a lot of potential for inclusive business. And through sharing your specific initiatives and interventions, I'm sure your colleagues in ASEAN can benefit from. Let us now turn to Singapore. Jirong, the guidelines stress the application of a variety of inclusive business approaches in line with the country's socioeconomic profile. Singapore, for example, promotes social enterprises to deliver services to its marginalized communities, but also reaches out to SMEs to deliver social impact. What are your activities to increase the impact of social enterprises, but also other more traditional SMEs?
Thank you, Marcus. I think firstly, I would like to thank IBAN, UNESCAP, and OECD for preparing these guidelines for the promotion of inclusive business in ASEAN. In general, we found it quite useful in providing respective ASEAN member states a framework on how IB development can be supported at the national level. I think given its linkages with MSME development, I think these recommendations could potentially be incorporated into ASME's overall agenda for supporting MSME development. But at the same time, I'm also heartened to note that this latest revision in guidelines, and like what you mentioned, make reference to specific socioeconomic profiles of ASEAN member states, instead of targeting a broad-based poverty definition approach. So internally, I think that this could be a good starting point to assess whether frameworks between IBAN or ASEAN and Singapore could potentially be aligned. But having said that again, Singapore, we do take a broader approach on how we define IBs from an SME development perspective. So I believe I've mentioned this before, or my counterparts have mentioned this before in the previous IBAN summits. We see IBs as companies with strong environmental, social, and governance practices that seek to drive sustainable development. So we see basically companies with ESG practices. They have the potential to generate both positive social and environmental impact and long-term business value. But specific to your question on our activities to increase the impact of IBs, social enterprises, and traditional SMEs, you could say that we are channeling more efforts into encouraging our enterprises to adopt more ESG practices. So channeling efforts and both resources. Without going further into the details, it's really a three-pronged strategy. I mean, really at the foundational level, we have brought policies in place to support the development of enterprises, including IBs in Singapore. Enterprises or IBs can potentially leverage an existing assistance and support to build their capabilities and accelerate growth, especially in the area of digital transformation. But beyond this broad foundational approach, we have two more further vertical pillars. As you're aware, we have funding and capacity building programs in place to support enterprises to develop or scale their social impacts. And at a policy level, there is indeed an ongoing review to assess the role of social enterprises in Singapore's economy. But beyond social impact, there's a more third and recent thrust. Basically, we're taking an approach to review the circular economy, to how the circular economy could also be developed in Singapore to make us more sustainable. As you all realize, Singapore is a small nation without natural resources. So we need to develop ourselves more sustainably and to avoid wasting precious resources and keeping them to use as long as possible by this circular economy approach. And on this note, regardless of the three prongs that we're looking at, right, I think COVID-19 has some way accelerated some of these issues or strategies that we're looking at. We cannot be looking at a status quo approach anymore. The COVID-19 does present a crisis, not just a crisis, this crisis presents an opportunity in how Singapore could make major push for sustainable development, including IBs. Yeah. It could strengthen our social, economic, climate, even as well as resource resilience. Yeah. So broadly, I think this is what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jirong. It's been an interesting experience with Singapore, as especially IB did not say sort of provide a spark in the beginning, but it's interesting how it has developed and moved ahead in your country. So let us now move to Vietnam. Ms. Trinh Huong, Vietnam undertook the IB landscaping process as described in the guidelines last year to develop policy recommendations. How did the IB landscaping unfold, and what were your key learnings from this process?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Marcus, for letting me sharing some opinion with you. Yes, as Marcus have a talk that we last year with the support of ISCAP and IBAN and OECD, we already conducted successfully a landscape study on the IB market in Vietnam, and actually it is very useful for it. And it can be considered to be a milestone for assessing the IB market in our country, the enabling environment, and also suggest us many precious and useful policy recommendations how to promote IB in Vietnam for the bottom pyramid. That study assessed 160 company at all size. And it found only 19 real and potential IB cases. But in fact, the number would be more than that with a larger sample size because of the limited budget and also the time of the study. So the number of the real IB and potential IB, according to the landscape study, still not reflect the real IB in a situation in Vietnam. And the landscape study outlined 7 areas we can do to promote IB in Vietnam. The first is a strategic commitment for IB and related policy work. And second, institutionalization, IB support. And third, the IB knowledge sharing through business association. And fourth, setting up an IB company accreditation system. And fifth, the IB business coaching. And sixth, establishing a risk reduction fund for the impact investor on IB. And last but not least, to promote IB monitor at the national and also regional level. As I said this morning in the high-level session, that landscape study provide us a very valuable fundamental source for us to design an IB action plan under the national program on the sustainable development of the private sector in Vietnam. And this November, MPI, my ministry, will submit to the Prime Minister for his approval. The landscape study also help us can contribute to develop the guidelines, the ASEAN guidelines for the promotion of IB in ASEAN. And as Marcus have said at the beginning of this session, that the guideline already adopted by the AEM last month. So that's what I want to say about the IB landscape study already help us to have a very strategic step of how to promote the IB in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you very much of highlighting the IB landscaping process and its very real results that's come out of it. Actually, this process, like before, it was called a IB landscaping study, but we thought very hard and then said it's not the study, the report in the end that counts, but actually the process And you illustrated this very nicely by giving all these streams of work that has emerged out of the this process. So again, people who look at these guidelines will find the process described there and can then adapt it to their needs. It provides a framework on policy development, and we can see here also from Vietnam that it has effected a real change. So thank you very much, Ms. Trin Huong. Let us now turn to Brunei. Ms. Leila, the guidelines highlighted that Brunei Darussalam is exploring the supporting framework for IB through the development and promotion of social enterprises. How have social enterprises developed in Brunei Darussalam?
Right, thank you, Marcus. I think first, let me take this opportunity to congratulate UNESCO, IBAN, and OECD for successfully organizing this third ASEAN Inclusive Business Summit. Speaking of inclusive business and what it actually means in building an enabling environment for inclusive and sustainable development, I would like to first highlight the various efforts made by the government of Brunei Darussalam in ensuring its people are properly cared for through the provision of social safety nets with emphasis on key policy directions under the Brunei Vision 2035. These policy directions include providing an economically sustainable social security system for those who are least able to cater for themselves, strengthening programs which will foster the spirit of entrepreneurship and self-reliance amongst its people, and providing opportunities for workers in the private sector to enjoy a similar sense of security as those in the public sector. To better understand Brunei Darussalam, it is worth noting and recognizing the government's contribution to the people in providing subsidies for a number of services, including free education, medical coverage, subsidies of selected commodities, and not forgetting the provision of houses, flats, and barracks and other social infrastructures in order to enhance quality of life, foster community solidarity, and promote development in the country. While data on poverty in Brunei is scarce with no national definition of BOP, our current statistics show that more than 9,400 families throughout the country are receiving monthly welfare assistance from the government. So these families are made up of low-income groups comprised of single mothers, special needs, and rural communities, among others. According to the World Bank data, the indicative BOP threshold for Brunei per capita per day is approximately BND $4, equivalent to USD $2.91. In reality, there are families that may not reflect the BOP threshold and have the ability to earn, but due to nature of family size, lack of access to programs, or very low academic achievement, this creates a circumstance of poverty in which families are caught in a vicious cycle. So this would allow IB to be much more targeted to the lower income pyramid of the population in the national context. Following the 2018-2019 IB Policymaker Engagement Program, IB comparatively has a bigger demand in other ASEAN member states as the market potential for scalability and replicability as BOP in ratio to population sizes is larger. While IB model is already advancing in some other member states, awareness on inclusive business concept is still very low in Brunei, and its promotion is almost non-existent. However, in considering similar socio-economic structure, Brunei has been focusing its efforts on the development and promotion of NGOs through social enterprises and CSR initiatives, which have become a prominent feature in tackling BOP and other social causes, alongside the country's continuous effort to promote entrepreneurship among the underprivileged and unemployed community. As we are starting to see the rise of social movements in Brunei, a working committee has been set up through His Majesty's Foundation, namely Yayasan Sultan Haji Hasnal Bolkiah, to help Brunei social enterprises tackle unemployment and poverty in the Sultanate, by providing them training, mentorship, and business opportunities. Currently, there are various initiatives being implemented to create an enabling structure for the development of social enterprises in the country. However, recalling the ASEAN SME Policy Index 2018 report and the outcomes from the first Social Enterprise National Workshop organized by His Majesty's Foundation in 2019, Brunei is yet to develop a clear definition or set of criteria for social enterprise and work towards developing sustainable solutions in tackling societal issues in the country. With the introduction of social enterprises as a concept, it has become an attractive model for NGOs to transition from charities or volunteering organizations to revenue-generating models and be self-sustaining. This is evident with the introduction of a 3-straight-year theme on entrepreneurship and technology being embedded in the annual National Youth Awards, held in conjunction with the National Youth Day celebrations as an incentive for organizations and individuals comprising of NGOs and SEs alike to create a self-sustaining platform and contribute to the country's socio-economic development. Over the years, we have seen a growing number of NGO activities in Brunei, with some others have matured and transitioned to hybrid SEs, SE models to sustain their operations. Speaking from the perspective of National MSME Development Agency, it is also important to highlight that in connecting IB promotion to MSME development, micro and small-sized enterprises as IB beneficiaries in Brunei largely compose about 81.6% contribution of MSMEs towards private sector. So essence of IB can already be found in our existing MSME ecosystem by addressing gaps for our local MSEs through developing programs linked to medium and larger companies, providing access to markets, financing, capacity building, peer learning, as well as mentoring programs. In addition, DARE has also recently launched the Go Digital ASEAN initiative in Brunei, which is designed to equip 4,000 individuals, including women and youth from rural areas and the underserved communities with crucial digital skills and tools. The initiative also covers micro and small enterprises in the effort to minimize the negative impacts of COVID-19 by helping them learn about programs that can help them continue to operate during the pandemic. So all these programs and initiatives indeed form part of the existing measures to affect benefit to the underserved and underprivileged communities, which can be integrated as part of the value chain. Yeah, I think that's all from Brunei for now. Thank you, Marcus.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Leila, and congratulations to your offer, to your sort of ideas on how to integrate social enterprise and inclusive business in your SME development and other policies in Brunei. One of the recommendations of the guidelines, very much in line what we've heard throughout the whole day, has been to go beyond the normal round of friends, to go get out of the box, reach beyond the familiar. And I'm very happy to pick up on the chat now that we got an intervention from the ASEAN Poverty Eradication and Gender Division, which lies in the ASEAN Socio-Cultural pillar. And I just would like to cite from it, because it shows that IB reaches beyond the economic pillar, which I think is absolutely crucial to make it more mainstream, to reach out to other divisions, to make it even more powerful. So let me cite from the chat. To pick up the point on COVID-19 recovery and to circle back to the points raised by the ACSME chair. At the regional level, the development and rollout of the guidelines on promoting IB resonates and reinforces ongoing initiatives at fostering more robust cross-sectoral and inter-pillar cooperation in ASEAN. For example, the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Rural Development and Poverty Eradication convened a special online meeting on reducing poverty and building resilience towards COVID-19 recovery. Promoting IB resonates with the key resolutions on invigorating rural livelihoods and ensuring that local rural economies and the food systems move without disruption. Also, IB ties in with a step towards a pro-poor, inclusive, gender and climate responsive approach to recovery from the pandemic. I think this is a really important statement here that shows that the work's been done by AXME is reaching beyond the economic pillar and thereby combining the economic and social impact part of inclusive business. So having heard about the way the guidelines were developed and what they are based on, let's look into the future. And I'd like to encourage also the audience to join us in the second round of questions and the panel to share with us their thought of what do you think has captured the imaginations of so many stakeholders, notably the policymakers, on inclusive business? And what next steps to promote IB on a national, regional, or maybe even global level do you see ahead? Please enter your thoughts into the chat now, and we will take turns among the panelists now to answer this question about the future of IB in ASEAN and on the national level. You can combine this with a recommendation from the chat as well. How do you get the businesses excited? We've heard about fantastic examples earlier today about from the pioneers of inclusive business. How do we take the step from the pioneers to the mainstream, which policy should provide? Let us go to Cambodia first. Bantu, what next steps do you foresee for Cambodia?
Thank you, Marcus. It's been brilliant to hear our ASEAN partner in their process of developing IB and supporting IB, and I congratulate the IB to expand their impact in ASEAN economic to ASEAN social cultural. And then in Cambodia, we would like to stress on three important A to move forward, which is the first A for awareness raising. It's been very good of ASEAN that we have developed the guideline for inclusive business, which is a baseline of recommendation for each country to say the same word and to keep synergy on how we can coordinate to each other to promote the way we can interchange our policy as well as any kind of issue that is raised by the private sector, because as you know, IB companies are very innovative in their approach and they need a lot of facilitation from the regulation side or the legislation side to amend, to adapt, to change according to their need, to create mutual benefit to each other. The second A I wish Cambodia wish to move is the advocacy. In the process of developing the inclusive business enabling environment of Cambodia, we strongly need a lot of partnership and advocacy, because as I mentioned earlier, it's still a new concept and maybe not widely accepted by different institutions. And the capacity to broadcast IB idea is still at the younger state. So I strongly looking for more support and more IB event to come in Cambodia. We were successful during the first forum of inclusive business in Cambodia in 2019, and there is a very powerful tool to engage our private sector as well as top leader to take IB as their first priority. And my third A would be acceleration to develop our IB supporting units and also the IB strategy. The supporting unit, I refer to all the relevant agency, including private sector, public sector, and also the impact investor. We are not just looking for the policy to come on the book itself, but we want to have translate the policy into something that the private sector can utilize it, such as how they can access the IB risk reduction fund, or how they can access for more IB business coaching to mainstream their businesses, to turn the way and to make them more flexible and make them accept more change. And the change that we made, the flexibility that the IB can offer will be the best instrument to improve our society economy at scale, and to change the way the people used to live traditionally, because as you all understand that the uncertainty of the economy, especially at the present of COVID-19, the world has to adapt to the new normal now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Van Tu. Let's move to Indonesia again, Ms. Victoria. Do you see IB promotion advancing on a sectoral path, or do you foresee a more general promotion of IB in your country?
Okay, actually, if the goal and target as well as the roadmap of the sectoral program has clear and fixed, the promotion through sectoral path is much better than general promotion. Case in Indonesia, in wellness tourism, the linkage of cooperation more clear to empower the micro businesses as partnership of the large company in giving specific training, capital, technology, and others treatment. Let me tell some cases in the which private sector lead the SMEs to be part of his business, as also mentoring them to produce the SMS product meet for the big market, big companies market. Firstly, Levi's Organic Company. Perhaps this morning they have already present his experience. A company specialized on organic products such as rice, fruit, sugar, and spices that applies organic farming method to ensure the sustainability of environment. The company has partnered up with many local farmers, not only in making them parts of the business, but also empowering them to cultivate organic products that meets international standard. So by doing so, it enables to improve local markets' livelihood through organic farming and fair trade. Secondly, I will mention Marta Tilar Company has been doing very well in incorporating local communities as part of their inclusive work. As a leading company in health and wellness sector in Indonesia, Marta Tilar has empowered women in Bilibante village in West Nusa Tenggara, through capacity building and training program. The training was given to teenage women and also the housewife by bringing some professional and experienced trainers in the spa field, entrepreneurship, green land management, and so on. As a result, the product of the SMEs are branded as Sari Ayu Spa, or as local spa brand with using local natural resources and local labor employees from Bilibante village. The other one is Hara Technology Company. Hara Technology is a data exchange platform that collect data of farmers as their partner. This data is used to help farmers to gain access to credit from bank. Through data risk analysis, which determine the amount of credit capital through data risk analysis. which determine the amount of the credit capital for farmers. The data collected by HARA includes farmers' personal data, geotagging such as area, location, and land ownership, cultivation such as time and type of plant, fertilizer and chemical use, ecology such as weather and soil type, up to the transaction value for the sale of the harvest. Farmers can use this data to select crop varieties, planting season, harvesting, and deciding potential market to sell their product. So we try to implement these IB models through by not in national strategy, but we collaboration with other companies, other people, other parties to work together to try to implement the IB models in wellness sector. Perhaps we can implement it also in another areas.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Victoria, to also highlight the success stories that you have. I think this answers one of the questions from the chat. How do you get business excited? You get it excited if they see this as a business opportunity.
Yeah.
And by highlighting those, then we can, the businesses will go there very quickly. Yeah. Thank you. So let's move to Singapore. I see there's an interesting discussion going on in the chat. Jirong, do you want to have a break now to continue discussing on the chat, or are you ready for your next question?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay. Did you see additional roles for Singapore in promoting IB, for example, as a regional finance hub?
So yes, I do see additional roles in this area. But broadly speaking, right, I mean, our counterparts at the Monetary Authority of Singapore, they have already been working on a long-term strategy to make sustainable finance a key feature of Singapore's role as an international financial center. So as part of this strategy, I think MAS announced its Green Finance Action Plan last year, which comprises 3 key thrusts. So building resilience to environmental risks, developing green finance solutions and markets, and leveraging innovation and technology. And this is not just an action plan. In fact, concrete steps has been taken to catalyze this sustainable finance in the region. This includes, I think, engaging our FIs to consider ESG as a criteria in the financial decision-making process. In fact, when I spoke to, I think, Standard Chartered, I think some months ago, they've already done this. I mean, beyond working with FIs, is also to develop green, social, as well as sustainability bond market in Singapore. And through this development, collaborate with local and international stakeholders to exchange best practices on sustainable finance. But beyond what MAS is doing, concurrently, I mean, we also noticed that the impact investment ecosystem is indeed maturing. We are seeing corporates who are interested in venture philanthropy, family offices and high net worth individuals who are prepared to use an ESG or impact lens to review or rebalance existing portfolios. And because of this, we're also seeing a lot of couple intermediaries entering the space to facilitate setting up of fund structures to match the supply and demand of impact capital. So yes, I could say that perhaps in the foreseeable future, some of these efforts that's already slowly taking root in Singapore could serve as a catalyst for impact investment to support the development of sustainable enterprises, including IBs in the region. I mean, that's as much as I could share for now. Yeah.
Jerome, thank you very much. I think that's great to see how these sort of apparently like separate developments in the impact investment or ESG sector or sustainability financing will have a positive effect on inclusive businesses in the region. In Vietnam, Ms. Trinh Huong, where do you see the focus of IB promotion developing? And picking up on a question from the chat, do you see a role for local NGOs in this process?
Thank you, Marcus. I totally agree with Ms. Victoria from Indonesia that we want to promote IB in our country. We should set up a strategic roadmap to promote IB with the focused sector and also targeted group. And we have the priority measures rather than general promotion. So in Vietnam, the focus of IB promotion in Vietnam, we are doing, because now we are designing an action plan, the national action plan to promote IB in Vietnam. So we're planning to focus on some sector, potential sectors. For example, agriculture, food processing, green production, healthcare, education, and public service, including water, electricity, energy supply. And we targeted with the some group, vulnerable group, like ethnic people, disability, and especially the women group. And for the measures, support measures, we will prioritize some following measures. First, the awareness on the IB is very important, because IB somehow still relative new for the enterprises in Vietnam. And I also see from the chat that one participant said that we should make the IB concept to be more attractive to the enterprises. I totally agree. And because we have to show to the enterprises that the IBs nowadays, with the increasing purchasing power, the IB market can provide new business opportunities for them. And the IB model is a win-win business model. So the IB benefits the enterprises, customers, employees, and also for the society for overall. So it means that the IB awareness promotion is very important. This is the first step we will focus on. And the second is IB accreditation. And I also want to answer the questions from the participants that the role of the NGO and the independent social organization is very important. Actually, it's very important. We are planning to cooperate with the business association and also the social organization, including the NGO, to set up the IB accreditation system. Yeah, and the third measures we will conduct is to design IB business coaching to support the company to upgrade their business model into the IB models. And the last but not least, we will promote the inclusive innovation and technology in my country. And it's for the first stage of the action plan, we will prioritize 4 measures in our draft of action plan. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You've got quite a lot on your plate, and it's great how it's been progressing from a start, from a process of landscaping to action plans to implementation in a comparatively fast speed, if I may say so. It goes very fast, this development of IB policies, from researching towards actual implementation. If I compare it to some other policy development, which takes almost decades, in IB, there seems to be a sense of urgency among all the players that we have seen so far. And I think that speaks for IB as a topic, because it does excite people once they truly understand it. Well, thank you very much to give us the overview about the future of IB policy in Vietnam. Let us now turn to Brunei. Ms. Leela, where do you see the opportunities to integrate inclusivity and social impact in Brunei's economic policy?
Right, thanks again, Marcus. So for Brunei, it is evident that the government will continue to prioritize the well-being of and welfare of its people through implementation of various initiatives to strengthen their participation, particularly in the fields of employment, education, society, as well as entrepreneurship. These opportunities are already reflected through the various measures that have been put in place by various stakeholders, particularly in our strive to achieve the objectives of Brunei Vision 2035, which seeks to transform Brunei Darussalam to become a nation that will be recognized for its highly educated and skilled people, high quality of life, and dynamic and sustainable economy. Furthermore, the National Council on Social Issues under the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sports has outlined a national master plan and national action plan to address issue of rising unemployment and social problems in the country in line with Brunei Vision 2035. In order to achieve inclusivity and maximize social impact in Brunei, there is still a need to continuously improve and strengthen the supporting ecosystem where opportunities for social enterprises and inclusive business can clearly be identified. There is a need to explore further collaboration with the private and corporate sectors and leverage on government resources and enabling environment to help transition NGOs to fully fledged SEs with growth and self-sustaining capability. On policy development, believe that there is a need to closely engage relevant stakeholders and agencies, including the Ministry of Finance and Economy, as the Ministry Authority for Industry to perhaps potentially develop the ecosystem further, and as well as policies to support IB promotion for the long term. Hence, the recently published guidelines for the promotion of inclusive business in ASEAN would be a useful resource to be ingrained in respective work to lay groundwork for promoting inclusive business model in Brunei Darussalam. So what we are seeing today indicates clearly that the agenda of inclusive business will continue to be enhanced and promoted regionally and globally. And for Brunei, I believe there will be opportunities for IB to be integrated into the existing ecosystem as IB is socialized further over time. As Brunei Darussalam prepares to take over the ASEAN chairmanship next year, I believe this would be a crucial part of the role we should continue playing and supporting in order to support the region's economic growth and social impact at scale. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Ms. Leila, and thank you for mentioning Brunei's upcoming chairmanship and the importance of IB in this context. And we look very much forward to working with you under the Brunei chairmanship next year, also on inclusive business development. I look forward to this development. Having now heard about all these activities, and I have to say they're very varied. We all know that the ASEAN member states are very heterogeneous, and that's why in the guidelines we stressed the policy instruments have to reflect the socioeconomic development in each country. But we believe that these guidelines are providing the basis for very many different activities and policy instruments, all leading to a similar goal of promoting inclusive business for economic growth and social impact at scale. Having heard all these great activities on the national level, let's turn again to the ASEAN level. Mr. Chair, what are the next steps of IB promotion that you envisage on a regional level?
Thank you again, Marcus. I mentioned in my opening remark this morning that SME has carried the torch for IB in ASEAN since 2017, when the ASEAN IB framework was first introduced. As the SME main focus is on MSME development, and thus, firstly, we will continue to raise awareness and footage for how the IB approaches could continue to contribute toward the AEC 2035 vision of a resilient, inclusive, people-oriented, and people-centered community through market-driven and innovative solutions to drive economic empowerment and social impact in ASEAN. This will be addressed in our midterm review of the ASEAN Strategic Plan of Action Plan on SME development, as well as in our COVID-19 pandemic recovery plan. Second, with increased understanding of the IB concept and model, it became apparent that IB could be an effective policy instrument for ASEAN member states in addressing both economic and social objectives, not only at the national level, but also at the regional level through cross-sectoral cooperation with other ASEAN community pillars. Thus, going forward, we will also explore possible collaboration with interested parties to address the various suggestions and promotion of IB to ASEAN regional priorities and as provided in the IB guideline. On this note, I would like to express my appreciation to colleagues and representatives of other sectoral bodies who participated in this IB summit. And I hope that the IB summit, in particular the guideline, is helpful in providing greater understanding on the IB approaches beyond MSME development in the areas such as women economic empowerment and poverty eradication and the ASEAN Social and Development Agenda, and in pursuing the Sustainable Development Goal or UN SDG, as well as in the ASEAN Recovery Plan effort to respond to COVID-19 pandemic. Now speaking on behalf of the Lao PDR, the concept of IB is totally new in Laos, in our country. We are a newcomer in IB promotion, although some form of IB activities might have existed in the country. Nevertheless, we have included IB in the SME development plan for 2021 to 2025. For us, it is very important to first translate the guideline into national language for wider dissemination among policymakers, businesses, and general public. And then to start with developing or formulating strategies for IB's enabling environment, followed by other steps. Therefore, it would be highly appreciated if the ASEAN Secretariat or other development partners can help seek funding support for Laos as well in the future. Now back to the capacity of SME chair. In conclusion, I would like to underline again that ASEAN has come a long way since the year the IB was first introduced to ASEAN in 2017. By the IB development at national level are at different stages in different member states. We hope that the guideline provide a systematic structure in IB approaches in ASEAN member states and in the region. The IB is a cross-sectoral effort, and most important, close cooperation and collaboration with private sector is the key. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you also for taking up the head of Representative Lao PDR. Apologies, we did not address this here, but I think it's great because you can now actually use this guideline as a framework for Lao PDR's path towards IB policy development, and we look forward to see those developments. There's not a lot for me to actually add to your closing remarks. As you mentioned, it's been a fantastic journey over a comparatively small amount of time since 2017. It's only 3 years that ASEAN put inclusive business on the agenda. And I'd like to congratulate the panel, but also all the other proponents of inclusive business in the ASEAN Secretariat and within AXME and within the ASEAN member states of the efforts they are putting in. And we can see already now, and it's hardly that I'm on a panel where we have during the panel actually some outcomes. You already received a very positive reply from your colleagues of the ASEAN social cultural community ready to engage on IB with you. So I think there is a lot still to be done. The ASEAN guidelines on promotion of inclusive business provide a framework, a basis, and we have seen it doesn't stop here. It continues, and it will continue within ASEAN and also beyond, because I know that the policymakers, for example, in Nigeria and Zambia, are very keen on learning from the ASEAN experience and taking those guidelines to heart. So with this, we are closing this session, and I'm handing back to Irene, our MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for this incredibly valuable dialogue. And thank you, participants, facilitators, and panelists for the engaging discussions of today. Many, many valuable messages have emerged during the discussions on what we have learned and what may be some priorities moving forward in the promotion of inclusive business in ASEAN. We will now proceed with the closing of this summit. It is my pleasure to now invite Ms. Karen Maguire, Head of Local Employment, Skills and Social Innovation Division, OECD, to give her closing remarks.
Great, thank you. So good evening to most of you and good afternoon to those like me who are dialing in from Europe. So, of course, the OECD is very pleased to participate and support this event and the development of the guidelines, which are really a great achievement. And so we really want to thank all of the participants and those who've contributed, as well as, of course, the trusted partners in the ASEAN Secretariat and SCAP and IBAN to help make this happen. And of course, we want to keep working with all of you and helping with this inclusive business agenda to support the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So just a couple of reflections and thoughts. First, given the COVID landscape and how much that has changed, and the skyrocketing unemployment, the inability for many to gain employment even in the informal sector, the need for public policies to just help firms survive the crisis so that these inclusive businesses can continue to do what they do. We heard earlier today about some of those that are most impacted, including the smallest inclusive businesses and those led by women. And so trying to address also these distributional effects of the crisis and what that will mean to support inclusive business more generally is going to be, a key issue that we're looking at here at the OECD, and I presume you and ASEAN will be looking at. Another point that has just come up in the discussions here and in OECD work is also about what are the massive implications of digitalization for a lot of our work and our business models and our solutions for social impact. So these are areas that we'll be working on. There's a call, I think, globally for using terms like building back better or rebuilding differently. And this is an area where, we think this inclusive business support is going to be increasingly important and politically relevant. And we're seeing in OECD countries as well that there is a greater interest in trying to support inclusive businesses, social enterprises, and others who are really trying to create, in a sense, this better tomorrow that the SDGs and other global platforms are trying to promote. So, what is the OECD doing? We're trying to support first through responsible business conduct. And one of the issues is, we have these OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises to have effective business operations across supply chains with a more inclusive lens. We have a project on responsible supply chains in Asia to enhance the respect of human rights, labor, environmental standards, and businesses engaged in supply so that they are more in line with corporate responsibility and responsible business conduct practices. In addition to supporting these guidelines, we have a number of tools that are available to ASEAN countries and that you're more than welcome to use. I think the discussion today has highlighted the importance of the awareness raising about inclusive business models and social enterprise and social economy models, and that this awareness raising needs to really be comprehensive. And I think the guidelines highlight a bit the importance of this and the communications throughout business communities, business schools, impact investors, national government, but also maybe just a note about local and subnational governments, because a lot of them are also creating innovations and opportunities that national policy can then pick up on as part of their supporting efforts. So as the sort of guidelines, as was just said, there's next steps to be thinking about in terms of regulations, definitions, enhancing access to finance, and how to matchmake with relevant investors, but also adapting public procurement. And these are all areas that we'll be continuing to work on as well, that we can share with ASEAN members and other stakeholders on the event today. And this is an area where, in particular, also social impact measurement, so that we can see the concrete results of all of these actions, is another area where the OECD is working on in its global action to promote the social and solidarity economy. So there are a couple of tools, and my colleague in a session earlier, Max, had mentioned some of them. Please feel free to write us if you're interested in accessing any of these. The work on missing entrepreneurs to support inclusive entrepreneurship, this better entrepreneurship policy tool, which you can use and gather many different stakeholders together. It's online, and it can help you really do a diagnostic to help with understanding where the most priority actions need to take place. And then we also do, if you're interested, you can look at other social entrepreneurship in country reviews, if that's something of interest to you. So maybe just in conclusion, I just wanted to say, that these international exchanges, I think, are really critical, and that we're doing this both ways, and that OECD is pleased to contribute to the activities here in the ASEAN region, but also we heard today, and we're taking back some of the exciting examples that you have shared today so that other countries outside of the region can learn. So I think that's really the key message here, that we continue to exchange on what works and how to make it happen. And this is one of those events. So thank you all for participating and supporting that initiative.
Thank you, Ms. Maguire, for your closing remarks. It is now my pleasure to invite Mr. Christian Yan, Executive Director of IBAN, to give his closing remarks. Over to you, Christian.
Yeah, thank you. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, in my opening remarks this morning, I congratulated ASEAN and the member states for the achievement in the development of IB policies. Now, this afternoon, I would like to congratulate all of you, the panelists, the moderators, but also especially the audience for the lively discussion in the chat, and also therefore for contributing really to the discussion and advancing the IB agenda. I won't give a summary now of the whole day. I think that will be done later on by Mia from ESCAP, but I just want to make a few points. For me, it was really amazing and inspiring to hear how much the countries advanced in their IB policy and strategy development, and listen to the really inspiring examples of IB in ASEAN. And I think it became one more time even more obvious how interlinked the whole ecosystem is, and that success is dependent on the interaction and collaboration of various actors. The companies, producers, financial institutions, and governments all have different mandates and needs, and yet when working together, the impact can be really tremendous, and that is what we are all afterwards. Now, we see success stories in value chains or in innovative financing mechanism. But what is also obvious, that more collaboration within a value chain could be advantageous for all actors. In addition, when we look at blended finance mechanism, there is still also great potential, I think, for more collaboration. From the side of IBAN, I can just assure you that we will continue to support ASEAN and promote inclusive business also on our global online platform, inclusivebusiness.net, in all its aspects. At the moment, together with a lot of other partners, we will also develop further and promote the inclusive business operational guidelines at a global level to contribute also to a better understanding of inclusive business globally. Again, collaboration here is key. So I started this morning with a focus on collaboration, and I would like to end this afternoon with collaboration. We need this kind of disruptive collaboration if we really want to have a fast and long-lasting COVID-19 response. Disruptive collaboration is one key element to speed up the inclusive business development. Earlier, I also mentioned that the progress of inclusive business in ASEAN encouraged other countries in the world to go the same path and promote inclusive business. Therefore, I would like to end now that I wish all of us not only that we stay healthy in this time of crisis, but that ASEAN and its member states continue this path of promoting inclusive business and being a shining encouragement to other countries and regions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jan, for your closing remarks. It is now my pleasure to invite Ms. Mia Mikic, Director of Trade, Investment and Innovation Division, United Nations ASCAP, to give her closing remarks.
Thank you, Irene, and thank you, Karen and Christian, for helping me close this very rich day of different aspects of the work on inclusive business. It is my great pleasure that I'm joining you at this closing session of the third ASEAN Inclusive Business Summit that is organized under the ASEAN umbrella along with our partners, Inclusive Business Action Network, IBAN, and the OECD. I think that it is at no one's surprise that the consensus finding of the day's deliberation is that if we are to build a more sustainable, resilient, inclusive Southeast Asia, that we need to encourage the emergence, expansion, and replication of inclusive businesses that do good and that do good at scale. So today's conversation signaled a few crucial steps that we should embark upon in 2021. And let me just very briefly point to some of these steps. First, we need to encourage governments and support them in their efforts to implement the regional guidelines for promoting inclusive business in ASEAN. This will dedicate efforts to develop the capacity of inclusive business champions and those at the base of the economic pyramid, and to build strategic partnerships. Second, we need to help expand the impact of inclusive business by improving the regulatory requirements to facilitate inclusive business offering solutions, adapting to new normal, the new normal, of course, in the context of COVID-19 pandemic and recovery, which includes the examples like telemedicine, fostering the technology, business and financial innovations that allow firms to develop inclusive business models and in the process enable micro and small and medium-sized enterprises and farmers to benefit from market access, digital services, and access to finance. Third, we need to ensure that our efforts in promoting inclusive business enable women's economic empowerment, micro and small and medium-sized enterprise development, and digital transformations by reviewing the impact that different support measures and inclusive business models have on the livelihoods and well-being of low-income people and marginalized groups. Finally, we need to continue to work collectively at the ASEAN level in the promotion of inclusive business, namely exchanging national experiences in promoting inclusive business. ESCAP will be ready to continue supporting ASEAN in this endeavor, and it is with a great pleasure that I can announce that we are currently discussing with Brunei a possibility that the next ASEAN Summit on Inclusive Business is organized and hosted under the Brunei chairmanship of ASEAN next year. At ESCAP, we are, of course, fully committed to continue supporting ASEAN member states to promote inclusive business, including through, as already mentioned, supporting governments implement the regional guidelines for promoting inclusive business in ASEAN through facilitating the exchange of experiences and lessons learned in this area. And I'm very pleased that my colleague from OECD is also finding this particular area of work very valuable for our stakeholders. And I'm sure that we will be collaborating and leveraging each other's work in this area. And of course, being an international organization that puts great value on evidence-based advisory, we will promote impact measurement to help inform future actions in this area. To advance progress and the emergence of and growth of more inclusive business models, we look forward working with you and other development partners, government agencies, business association, civil society partners, impact investors, and individuals that have advanced and forward-looking ideas that can enrich our work. Let me congratulate all of you for your dedication to inclusive business, to addressing the unprecedented social and economic challenges brought by COVID-19 pandemic, and to wish you well in your efforts to build back better. Please stay safe and stay well, and thank you very much from ESCAP for your contribution to this work. Thank you. Back to you, Irene.
Thank you, Ms. Mikic, for your closing remarks. With this, we are closing a day rich in discussions and windows of opportunity to promote inclusive business. Before we officially conclude, please turn your video on and give an applause to each other, to all of you who have contributed and who have made this event possible. I'm going to ask Kavya to please stop the screen share now so that we can put the view into gallery mode. And if you're willing and if you are able, we would welcome you very much to turn your camera on for a brief moment so that we can take a virtual group picture together. I may ask you to smile for a little while because I need to scroll through a few faces. So please hold those smiles when I ask you to do so. I see a lot of cameras turning on, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for participating in this activity with us. Let me give our fellow participants a little bit more time to turn their cameras on in case they'd like to join in on the photo as well. All right, let me take a photo now. On the count of 3, please smile for the camera and hold it. 1, 2, 3. Keep smiling. Keep smiling. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. The 3rd ASEAN Inclusive Business Summit has now officially concluded. We wish you a great rest of your day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Take care.
And more,